I want you to try something for a second. Just take a look around the room you're currently sitting in.
Yeah, look at the walls, the furniture.
Right, the empty space between you and the door. It feels solid, right? Like it feels fixed.
Or completely inert.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're totally conditioned to look at our surroundings as just inert physical matter.
Yeah.
But what if it isn't?
That is the big question.
Right. What if the room you're in right now is actually a haunted house built, maintained, and completely rendered by your own unconscious mind?
It is quite a paradigm shift to even consider that. We are so used to separating the internal landscape of our thoughts from the external architecture of our environment.
Yeah.
But bridging that gap, it really changes everything about how we interact with the physical world.
It changes everything. And that is exactly what we're exploring in today's deep dive. We're opening up a highly, highly fascinating document. It's called the Bhutadamara Protocol, Architecture of the Sovereign Axis.
A very heavy title.
It is. And when we were, reviewing these excerpts, I found myself constantly pausing just to process the sheer scale of what is being proposed here.
I had the exact same reaction.
Because this material, it doesn't present itself as some dusty, abstract philosophy or like a poetic metaphor. It acts as a literal user manual.
Yes.
It outlines what it calls the most sophisticated technology ever gifted to humanity.
And what's particularly unique about this protocol is the specific lens it uses. We are looking at a really profound blend of ancient wisdom frameworks, but they are being viewed through a highly structural, almost technological understanding of human consciousness.
Right.
It takes ideas that might traditionally be siloed into mysticism or esoteric religion and treats them as a precise, replicable science of the mind and the environment.
It takes the mystical and makes it mechanical. I love that. So let's jump straight into the blueprint. The contour of this document centers on something called the Bhutadamara Tantra.
Which, again, is framed as a technology.
Exactly. The central figure here is Vajrapachi, a figure traditionally known as the holder of the Vajra. But specifically, this protocol focuses on his form as Bhutapara, and that translates to the tamer of spirits.
This raises an important point right out of the gate, I think, regarding how we define this figure, because the protocol makes a very crucial distinction here.
Oh, definitely.
Bhutapara is not presented as a deity that you pray to, or some external savior you just passively worship.
Right, you don't just ask it to fix things for you.
No, approaching it that way is a fundamental misunderstanding of the technology. Instead, the author defines Bhutapara as a noonological prototype for the sovereign human.
A noonological prototype. Let's unpack that term for a second because it sounds really heavy.
It does.
Noonological relates to the mind or the intellect. So basically, we are looking at a template or a blueprint for the ultimate sovereign version of the human mind.
Yes, the optimal operating system.
Exactly. The operating system we are meant to install and step into. And the protocol diagnoses exactly why we need this upgrade so desperately right now.
The diagnosis is spot on.
It describes our modern condition in a way that is just painfully accurate. It says, the world around us has devolved into slop.
Slop is a very evocative term for it. Within this context, it refers to the profound degradation of our focus, our energy, and our physical environments.
Yeah.
It is the fragmentation of attention we all experience in the modern digital age.
It's that feeling of doom scrolling, of cognitive fatigue, of waking up and already feeling like your battery is at 10%.
Exactly.
And because of this accumulated slop, our environment becomes that haunted house we mentioned earlier, a space that literally bleeds our energy dry.
Precisely. And when you're stuck in that haunted, energy-draining simulation, the Bhutadamara frequency is the exact tool used to restore what the author calls the vertical axis.
The vertical axis. Okay, I think the best way I can describe this to you is by using a computer system analogy.
That usually works best for this material.
Imagine your mind and your environment are a unified hard drive, and right now it is deeply corrupted. You have endless pop-up ads, malicious background processes, and fragmented files just draining your processing power.
Just a total mess.
Right. So the Bhutadamara frequency acts as the hard reboot. It's the command line sequence that forces the system to drop the corruption, realign, and stand completely upright again. It restores that central vertical alignment so the system can actually function properly.
That is a highly appropriate analogy, especially because the protocol explicitly treats the interface for this technology as code.
Yes.
To actually use this non-logical prototype to initiate that hard reboot you just mentioned, we are instructed to utilize something called the long heart mantra.
And it describes this mantra as a sequence of geometric strikes. I really love that phrasing.
It implies incredible precision.
It really does. These aren't just pretty words you're chanting. They're geometric strikes meant to recalibrate the very building blocks of reality around you.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we aren't just talking about chanting for a psychological placebo effect. This framework frames these syllables as causal commands.
Right.
So let's actually deconstruct this mantra, treating it exactly as the blueprint suggests, like lines of code designed to reprogram your immediate reality.
Let's do it. So the full code, the mantra, is Bhutadamara Adipati Akovyakirina Sarva Bhuta Patava Bichakani Sadhayafa.
Very well done.
Thank you, I practiced. Now, breaking that down into its geometric strikes. The first strike is Bhutadamara Bhuta Adipati. The text describes this as the ultimate assertion of sovereignty.
Yes.
It is the simple, undeniable statement, the space belongs to me.
It is the establishment of the central node. Sticking with your computer analogy from before you can clean a corrupted system, you must establish administrator access.
Oh, that makes total sense.
You are claiming absolute jurisdiction over the space you occupy. You are no longer a guest in the haunted house. You are the owner.
Right.
Then the next strike is Akovya Kirina.
So if the first line is claiming admin access, Akobi Kiina must be establishing the secure server you're operating from.
Yeah.
How does the text describe that anchor? Because it uses some very specific terminology there.
It does. It identifies the source of this authority as the crowned immovable center of the Vajra family.
Okay, we need to unpack that.
To clarify that jargon, the Vajra family in these ancient frameworks represents indestructible, diamond-like clarity. It is the sharp, unclouded nature of reality. And Akabya translates directly to immovable.
Okay, so you are not just claiming the space from your fragile, everyday ego, which changes its mind every 5 minutes.
Exactly.
You are anchoring that claim in an immovable, unshakable center. You are locking in the foundation of that vertical axis.
Exactly. You are grounding the command.
So once you've claimed administrator access and secured the server, you have to run the antivirus scan. You have to name the corruption.
Right.
The next line of code is Sarva Buddha Preta Pishachas, and the protocol literally refers to this as naming the malware.
Yes, and the categorization of this malware is incredibly revealing. It breaks it down into 3 distinct types of energetic corruption that are actively degrading your reality. First, the Bhutas.
Okay.
These are defined as environmental static.
Which we all feel. It's that background hum of anxiety when you walk into a messy room.
Yes, exactly.
It's the endless low-grade noise and distraction that prevents true, deep focus. You walk into your kitchen, forget why you're there, and feel a vague sense of overwhelm. That is a Bhuta.
Precisely. It's the low-level friction of modern life.
Yeah.
Then we have the Pretas. This framework translates Pretas as scarcity scripts.
Scarcity Scripts.
In classical mythology, Pretas are hungry ghosts with tiny necks and huge stomachs. They are never able to get enough. Here, they are redefined as deeply ingrained, repetitive psychological loops of lacking.
The constant gnawing feeling that there just isn't enough. Not enough time, not enough energy, not enough money, not enough validation.
Yes.
It is a psychological loop that manifests as a literal environmental drain on your system.
And finally, we have the Pishachas.
The protocol calls these violent torsion fields, which sounds incredibly intense.
They are the most volatile of the 3. If Bhutas are static and Pretas are draining loops, Pishachas are active, chaotic disruptions.
Okay.
They are the sudden destructive spirals of emotion or conflict that seem to pull the very geometry of a room out of alignment.
Have you ever walked into a room right after 2 people had a screaming match?
Yes, the air feels thick.
Exactly. The space feels physically distorted. That is a violent torsion field. So in this single line of code, you are identifying and targeting all 3. The static, the scarcity scripts, and the volatile disruptions.
You've claimed the space, identified the immovable center, and named the malware. The next strike in the mantra is Satya.
Akaya.
This is the command line to subdue and recruit. And I really want to pause here because this specific instruction is a massive departure from how we usually think about dealing with negative energy.
There really is.
The goal here isn't to destroy the malware.
What's fascinating here is the absolute efficiency of this technology. The protocol states very clearly, we are not destroying energy, we are forcing it to serve the logos.
Right, let's define logos in this context for a second, just to be totally clear.
Yeah, please.
In this specific context, the logos represents the fundamental, rational ordering principle of reality. It is the conscious, sovereign design as opposed to random entropic chaos.
Okay.
When you encounter environmental static or a violent torsion field, conventional thinking says you must fight it, repress it, or obliterate it. But basic physics tells us energy cannot be destroyed. It can only change form.
Right.
So instead of fighting a losing battle to destroy energy, this protocol commands you to subdue that chaotic energy and recruit it.
I love that.
You reorganize its geometry so that it powers your sovereign axis instead of draining it. You are taking the corrupted code and rewriting it into a functional utility.
That is such a grounded, practical way to handle stress or environmental chaos. You aren't fighting the energy of your own environment. You are conscripting it. You are putting it to work.
Exactly.
And then we hit the final strike, the execution command, HEFI. The author calls this the causal seed, the final strike that shatters what it refers to as the Death Naga simulation.
The Death Naga simulation represents that entirely drained, cyclical, corrupted state of the haunted environment.
Right.
A Naga is traditionally a serpentine entity, and here it symbolizes the endless, suffocating coil of energy consumption without any productive output. HEFI is the enter key.
The execution.
Yes. It is the sudden, sharp termination of the old program and the forceful implementation of the new sovereign geometry you just coded.
So we have this incredible string of code, but what does this all actually mean for us practically, just walking around in our daily lives? The document explains that this specific sadhana, this protocol we just walked through, acts as a vital bridge.
Yes.
It bridges the gap between ancient esoteric wisdom and a forthcoming body of work it refers to as the Dausal Code.
And this bridge is necessary because of how our understanding of reality has evolved. This brings us to perhaps the most vital conceptual shift in the entire document.
This part blew my mind.
In ancient times, when people experienced these Bhutas, Pretas, and Pishachas, they often viewed them as literal external ghosts, disembodied spirits haunting a graveyard or an old abandoned building.
But this protocol completely redefines them. It says these spirits are actually the madhyama processors of our own unconscious mind.
Let's define matama. In ancient linguistics and philosophy, matama refers to the intermediate stage of sound or thought.
Okay.
It is the subconscious processing layer that exists between pure, unmanifested consciousness and outward physical action. So these spirits are not invaders from the outside. They are your own internal intermediate processes.
Right.
But, and this is where the framework gets truly wild, it states they are phase-locked to the physical matter in our homes and offices.
This is a really difficult concept to wrap my head around. Are they saying the room literally changes, or is this a metaphor? Because the text implies that the walls of your bedroom, the desk in your office, the literal physical matter around you is phase-locked to your own unconscious processes.
The document treats it as a literal structural reality. The haunting is inside out.
Inside out.
If we go back to your computer analogy, if your unconscious mind is the hard drive processing all these scarcity scripts and traumas, your physical living room is the monitor displaying those corrupted files. The physical space around you is holding the geometry of your own mental malware.
It forces a complete reevaluation of your immediate surroundings. If your office feels draining, if it feels like a haunted house, this framework argues it is because your own madhyama processors have woven your scarcity scripts and violent torsion fields into the very matter of the room.
Exactly.
It's a feedback loop. Your unconscious programs the room,
Right.
and the room reinforces the unconscious.
You sit at your desk, the desk reflects your anxiety back to you, which makes you more anxious, which further corrupts the space.
So how do we break the loop? The author states, the Bhutadamara sadhana provides a practical, physical method to clean this modern haunted house from the inside out. And it names two specific methods used in this process, Vajra fire and laminar suture.
While the excerpts don't provide a comprehensive step-by-step tutorial on executing these exact methods, the terminology itself gives us a very clear theoretical application.
Right.
Vajra fire implies a purifying, indestructible energy used to burn away the slop and the static. It is the active clearing mechanism.
If we think about how that applies to a normal Tuesday, Vajra fire feels like an uncompromising cognitive interruption.
Yes.
It's that moment you recognize a scarcity script spinning up, so you start panicking about an email, and you actively, ruthlessly burn that thought process down before it comes approaching to the room.
Yeah.
You should say no to the distraction.
That is a very practical application. It is the severing of the corrupted loop. And then we have laminar suture, which suggests a process of repairing or smoothing out the tears in the environment's fabric.
Okay.
Laminar refers to smooth, uninterrupted flow, like water moving without turbulence. And suture is a stitch.
So you are using Vajra fire to burn away the chaotic torsion, and then you are using laminar suture to smoothly stitch the energetic geometry of the room back together.
Precise.
Maybe that looks like deliberately reorganizing your physical workspace after a stressful project, or taking 5 minutes to intentionally regulate your breathing and posture, smoothing out the friction in your own nervous system, which in turn smooths out the room.
It is a totally different way of conceptualizing your interaction with space. You aren't just dusting shelves or tidying up. You are using Vajra fire to burn out the scarcity scripts phase-locked into your living room furniture.
It makes vacuuming sound a lot more epic, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But if we step back to look at the broader implications of all this, the document asks us to hold a specific big-picture theme in our minds.
Yes, the big takeaway.
And that theme is the transmutation of the elements. It states quite profoundly that every single moment is a cosmogenesis.
Cosmogenesis, the birth of the cosmos. By stating that every moment is a cosmogenesis, the protocol is reminding us that reality isn't a fixed, done deal that happened billions of years ago.
Right.
It is a continuous frame-by-frame rendering. It's constantly being generated.
And this speaks directly to your reality as a listener. You are not living in a dead, inert world. You are living in a haunted scaffolding of your own making.
It is a sobering thought, but an ultimately empowering one.
Absolutely.
The spirits, which we now understand to be those internal unconscious processors, are currently weaving your reality, and they are doing so based on what the framework calls your torsion.
Your torsion.
Yes, your unresolved trauma, your accumulated slop, and your lack of focus. That is the raw material your unconscious is using to build the scaffolding of your daily life.
But the ultimate goal of this entire protocol is a massive shift in identity. Yeah. We are moving from being the passive victims of this haunted house to becoming what the author calls architects of a mandala.
A mandala being a perfectly ordered, perfectly aligned geometric structure.
Right.
To become the architect of a mandala means you are consciously directing that cosmogenesis. You are taking the labor force of the universe, all that raw energy currently being wasted on maintaining your scarcity scripts and trauma loops, and turning it away from the death naga simulation.
Because energy is neutral. It's just a labor force waiting for instructions. It will build a haunted house just as easily as it will build a palace. It just depends on who's holding the admin keys.
Exactly. You are recruiting that labor force back to the sovereign axis. You are reclaiming the rendering process.
You are taking back control of the simulation, and this protocol, this user manual, is just the beginning. The text briefly notes that everything we've discussed lays the first brick in a new citadel.
The groundwork.
Yeah, it sets the groundwork for a follow-up document called the Dausal Code, Geometry of the Haunted Matter.
It suggests that once you understand how to use the Noological prototype of Bhutadamara to restore your access and claim administrator access, the next step is a deep dive into the literal physical geometry of the matter you are now commanding.
Which is just incredible to think about.
I want to read the closing thought from the source material because it brilliantly synthesizes everything we've explored today.
Please do.
Matter is the logos wearing a mask of spirits. To the uninitiated, it's a haunted house. To the sadhaka, it's a Vajra engine waiting to be turned on. Stay vertical. Stay Akala.
Matter is the logos wearing a mask of spirits. That is incredible. Wait, before we wrap up, what do sadhaka and Akala mean in that context? We should define those for anyone unfamiliar.
Of course. A sadhaka is a dedicated practitioner. It is someone actively using the sadhana or the protocol. They are the operator of the technology.
Okay.
And Akala translates to immovable or unshakable. It refers back to that secure server, the Akobia Center we discussed earlier.
So stay vertical.
Yeah.
Stay unshakable. Okay, so a quick wrap up of what we've unpacked today. We possess a profound, actionable user manual in the Bhutadamara Protocol. It's a technology designed to reclaim our sovereign axis from the slop of the modern world.
Yes.
By using the geometric strikes of the Long Heart mantra, we can establish admin access, identify our internal malware, the static, the scarcity scripts, the violent torsion fields, and recruit that energy. By actively applying Vajra fire and laminar suture to our daily lives, we transform the haunted, energy-draining spaces around us into functioning Vajra engines. We stop being victims of our unconscious rendering, and we become the architects of our own mandala.
It is a complete and total recalibration of how we exist in space. And I'd like to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building upon the mechanics of this framework. We've established that the physical matter in our homes and offices is phase-locked to the Madhyama processors of our unconscious mind. The room literally holds the shape of your mind. So what actually happens to the physical room around you, the exact moment you finally truly break a deeply ingrained, lifelong scarcity script.
Wow.
If the internal code is rewritten, does the literal geometry of the space change when the malware is deleted? Does the light hit the walls differently? Does the acoustic resonance of the room shift? When the haunted house becomes a Vajra engine, what does that transmutation actually look like to the naked eye?
That is an incredible thing to think about as you sit in your room right now. Does the monitor look different when the hard drive is finally wiped clean? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take a fresh look at the physical scaffolding around you today. Remember, you hold the code to reprogram it. And as the protocol says, stay vertical. We'll catch you next time. Welcome to our deep dive. If you are joining us right now, I really want you to prepare yourself. Because our mission today is to, well, it's to completely upend how you view the physical objects around you.
Yeah, completely turn it upside down.
Seriously, by the end of this conversation, the way you look at a messy room or a broken appliance.
Or even something as simple as a drop of bathwater.
Right, a drop of bathwater.
Yeah.
It is going to change in a totally different, entirely unexpected, and potentially haunted way.
Haunted is definitely the word for it.
It is. So we are focusing today on a single source material. It's a fascinating, incredibly dense, and sometimes just mind-bending text called the Dausal Terma, Geometry of the Haunted Matter.
And it is an absolute trip to read.
Oh, it's a massive trick.
Yeah.
But we're going to extract the most practical nuggets from it for you today, translating these highly abstract concepts into things you can actually observe in your daily life. So, okay, let's unpack this. The core premise of this text is that matter, like the physical stuff you are touching right now, is not a static thing.
Not at all.
It's not some boring collection of periodic table atoms just sitting there, waiting for you to interact with them. Instead, the Dausal Terma defines matter as a phase-locked waveform.
What's fascinating here is how that single phrase, phase-locked waveform, it just completely redefines the boundary between our unconscious minds and the physical world.
Yeah, it erases it.
Exactly. The entire thrust of today's deep dive is exploring how this philosophy argues that this boundary, the strict line we usually draw between our internal mental state and external physical matter, is actually a complete fiction.
A total fiction.
Yeah.
And it's not just a philosophical metaphor to make us feel connected to the universe. Right?
No, not at all. The author presents this as a literal structural reality. If you have ever walked into a room and felt an immediate heaviness or noticed that your physical space falls into total chaos exactly when your mind does, the Dausal Terma offers a highly specific geometric explanation for why that happens.
It really does.
It says matter isn't a noun, it is a verb. It's a continuous, active process of energy locking into a specific phase or shape.
That is just such a wild concept to wrap your head around. It implies that my coffee cup isn't just a cup. It's a continuous event happening in real time.
Right, an event.
And the text gets so incredibly specific with its terminology to explain how this event occurs, which is what I really want us to dig into first.
Yeah.
Let's look at the foundational architecture of reality according to this Dausal view. They break it down into these interacting forces. First, you have what is called the white drop.
The logos.
Exactly, the logos, or pure intelligence. Think of it as the ultimate blueprint of reality. Then on the other side, you have the red drop. And the red drop represents Gaia, which the philosophy defines as pure potential, or matter itself. So how does this actually work? You have pure intelligence meeting pure potential.
Yeah, you have the pure idea and you have the raw material. And the moment those two drops meet, they don't just gently mix together like watercolors, they crash into each other.
They collide.
Imagine pure, formless potential as a perfectly still ocean, and the logos, the intelligence, is a massive sound wave hitting that water. When the sound wave hits, it forces the water into intricate geometric ripples. The Dausal Terma tells us that where the white drop and the red drop intersect, they create living tension patterns.
And those tension patterns have a very specific name in the text.
Yes, these intersection points, these active patterns of tension are called the Bhutas. The Bhutas are the actual tangible result of intelligence trying to shape raw potential into something recognizable.
And this leads to one of the most surprising claims in the entire source material. It completely throws out the high school chemistry class version of reality that we all grew up with.
It really does. Goodbye, periodic table.
Right, because in the Dausal view, elements are not periodic table atoms. They aren't little spheres of carbon, oxygen, or iron sitting inertly on a chart. The author literally calls elements archetypal vectors of consciousness. I just want you to sit with that for a second. The physical building blocks of your environment are vectors of consciousness.
It's heavy.
I have to be honest, when I read that, I had a hard time visualizing it. What does it actually mean for a carbon atom to be a vector of consciousness?
Well, it forces a total paradigm shift. It means that an element isn't just a physical building block. It's a carrier of specific informational and behavioral traits. And the philosophy goes further by referring to the entities that govern these vectors as spirits.
Spirits. Which sounds very spooky.
It does, but it explicitly warns us, and this is a crucial distinction for anyone trying to grasp this source material, that we are not talking about Victorian-era ghosts.
No guys in white sheets.
Right. We are not talking about spirits rattling chains in a dusty attic or poltergeists throwing plates around. The Dausal Terma defines these spirits as sublogoic processors.
Sublogoic processors.
Yeah.
That phrase is amazing. It sounds like a piece of cutting-edge computer hardware mixed with ancient mysticism.
It's the perfect description for it.
And the examples given are so profoundly mundane and localized. The text says these sublogoic processors exist piecemeal in localized objects, and the specific examples provided are a broken oven or a drop of bath water. But hold on, I need you to ground this for me.
Sure.
Because if my oven breaks, my very first thought is a blown thermal fuse or a bad heating element. I'm not thinking that the foundational geometry of the universe is out of alignment.
Yeah.
How does Dausal philosophy bridge that gap between a broken appliance and these ancient conceptual forces?
That's the perfect question, because the Dausal perspective doesn't deny the existence of the thermal fuse.
Okay.
Rather, it argues that the thermal fuse burning out is just the macroscopic physical symptom of the underlying geometry going out of alignment. The spirit of the oven, meaning the sublogoic processors actively organizing the raw potential of the metal, electricity and heat into the functional blueprint of an oven, has crashed.
The tension pattern failed.
The tension pattern has failed entirely. So you have these processors operating on a tiny local scale in the broken oven sitting in your kitchen. But then the philosophy notes that they also exist in aggregate. All these tiny localized processors come together, networking like a massive supercomputer, to form the global elemental field of Gaia.
Okay, so my broken oven and the entire planetary elemental field are operating on the exact same fundamental architecture.
Yes.
They're both made up of these sublogoic processors, these Bhutas, trying to reconcile the white drop of intelligence with the red drop of matter.
Precisely. And because they are processors, it means they are actively running a program. They're processing code. The state of that program determines how the physical matter behaves, and importantly, how it feels to you when you interact with it.
How it feels.
Exactly. This brings us to the two radically different ways this energy can flow. The first state, which is the ideal healthy state, is what the text calls the Dakini suture.
Right, the Dakini suture is what happens when an element is in laminar flow. Now, laminar flow is a term borrowed from fluid dynamics, meaning the energy or the fluid is moving smoothly in perfectly parallel layers with absolutely no disruption or cross currents.
It's perfectly ordered.
When the elemental energy is in this pristine state, we call it a Dakini. This is the energy in its nurturing mode, its teaching mode. The author gives a very specific, almost poetic example of this, describing it like the water that calmed Violet.
It's a beautiful image.
You can instantly picture that, right?
Uh-huh.
The soothing, perfectly ordered, restorative quality of matter when you slip into a warm bath after a terrible day. And the water just seems to know exactly how to hold you.
It is the environment working in perfect harmony with you. The processors are functioning without a single glitch, translating the blueprint of the logos into the raw material of Gaia without any friction whatsoever. The physical space feels supportive. It is literally teaching and nurturing you because the elements are aligned in that smooth, laminar flow.
It's that feeling of a clean, bright room.
Yes, when a space feels vibrant, clean, and welcoming, you are experiencing the Dakini suture. But as we all know from living in the real world, our physical environments do not always feel that way.
No, they definitely do not. And here's where it gets really interesting. What happens when the program crashes? What happens when things go wrong? The Dausal Terma introduces the counterpart to the Dakini suture, which is called the Bhutanaga suture. Wait, Naga, like the mythical serpent?
Exactly like the serpent.
How does that connect to fluid dynamics and twisted elements?
It's a great metaphor if you think about it. Think of a serpent coiling and twisting. The Naga suture happens when an element is no longer in that smooth, parallel, laminar flow. Instead, it is in a state of torsion. It is twisted, knotted up, and churning.
Just a mess.
A complete mess. The author explains that this twist, this torsion, is caused by trauma, or what the text bluntly calls slop, or importantly, a lack of a vertical axis. When the element is twisted like this, it manifests as what traditional Eastern thought might call a Bhuta, a Preta, or a Pishachas.
Okay, let's pause right there, because if someone goes and Googles Preta or Pishachas, they're going to find descriptions of hungry ghosts or flesh-eating demons. We need to translate that for the listener.
Absolutely. And applying a high level of clarity here is essential. The text is actively repurposing these terms. We are not talking about literal monsters hiding in your closet or ghouls haunting a graveyard.
Right.
The philosophy uses these dramatic terms to describe corrupted physics. It is geometric slop. A Preta, or hungry ghost in this context, describes a localized physical environment that is structurally starved or draining. A Pishachas represents a space that feels actively predatory or chaotic. It is the real-world implication for you, the listener. This state of torsion is the true haunted aspect of matter.
So when we talk about haunted house, or even just an object that gives you the creeps, the Dausal Terma is arguing that you are not sensing a dead person pacing the hallways. You are sensing an element stuck in torsion.
Exactly. You are feeling the heavy, sticky, draining energy of matter that has lost its structural integrity. The local sublogoic processors are jammed. They are filled with slop.
That makes so much sense.
Think about that visceral, heavy feeling you get when you walk into a room where a terrible, screaming argument just happened 5 minutes prior, or the oppressive feeling of a neglected, decaying building. That heavy feeling isn't just your imagination projecting onto the room. According to this philosophy, it is the actual, literal, geometric reality of torsion. The space is twisted.
Okay, so if my messy kitchen or a tense living room is literally in torsion, how did it get that way? Who is actually building this messy reality? That brings us to how these Bhutas actually produce and support physical form. The source uses a brilliant analogy that feels like a construction site.
Yes, the labor force.
Right. The text outlines that the Bhutas are essentially the labor force, the living geometry that holds the red drop of Gaia in a particular shape. So the Logos acts as the architect, providing the blueprint. What the text calls the word in the Bhutas are the worldly spirits, the workers in hard hats, that actually weave the matter into that blueprint. They act as the structural scaffolding of your reality.
It is a phenomenal way to conceptualize it. You have the blueprint and you have the raw materials. But without the labor force, the Bhutas, nothing gets built. They are the active agents of creation and preservation. But if we follow the construction analogy, what happens if the labor force is completely confused?
Right. What if they get bad instructions?
What if the foreman is drunk, the blueprints are smudged, and they are dealing with a compromised work environment? The Dausal Terma states that if the labor force is chaotic, the physical form they produce is fragile, messy, and unlucky.
Unlucky. I love that it uses that word because it implies that bad luck isn't just random chance from a roll of the cosmic dice. It's a structural failure in the scaffolding of your reality. Your reality is prone to collapsing because the builders are confused.
It's structurally unsound.
And this connects directly back to the listener's daily life. Remember earlier when we talked about the boundary between the unconscious mind and matter being a fiction? The author calls this phenomenon the mirroring field. The Dausal update to our traditional way of thinking is that the intuitive, ancient view of Platonic forms is correct. But the twist is how deeply our own personal minds are implicated in the process.
This is the crucial part.
The Bhutas in your apartment, the physical mess, the dirty dishes piled in the sink, the slop on your floor, are actually phase-locked to the ghost in the unconscious fields of the people living there. So to be clear, the dirty dishes aren't just a symptom of me being lazy or tired. They are literally phase-locked to my unconscious mind. My physical mess is a mirror of my mental mess.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the text introduces a highly alarming concept called the death naga state. When a human being enters this state, perhaps through deep depression, severe anxiety, extreme stress, or unaddressed trauma, they aren't just suffering internally in the privacy of their own brain.
Because the boundary is a fiction.
Because the boundary between mind and matter is a fiction, a person in the death naga state is essentially a radio tower, literally broadcasting torsion into the elements around them. Their internal ghosts, their mental slop, are phase-locking with the local elements, corrupting the instructions being given to the Bhuta labor force in their immediate vicinity.
Wow.
The person is actively twisting the energy of their space. That is what makes their apartment feel haunted or unlucky.
Yeah.
They are feeding corrupted code to the builders.
So what does this all mean? If my internal state is broadcasting torsion, twisting the elements, and turning the labor force in my apartment into a chaotic mess, how do I fix it? How do I clear a haunted space if I'm the one who haunted it?
It's the ultimate question.
The Dausal Terma doesn't just leave us with this terrifying problem, it actually gives us the structural solution. The text explains the concept of entering the red drop. It states that correct form is properly produced when the vertical axis, which it associates with the unshakable order of Shiva, or the logos, strikes the red drop of Gaia, the raw potential.
Notice how it uses the word strike very deliberately. It is an active, forceful, intentional event. This strike happens through a practice the text identifies as puja. Now, normally we think of puja as a religious ritual, maybe lighting incense and chanting. But let's use a modern metaphor to explain the mechanics laid out here.
Okay, I like that.
Think of puja not as chanting, but as a system reboot. If your computer's operating system gets corrupted by a virus, that's the torsion, it starts glitching, slowing down, and crashing. The puja is the command prompt that forces the software back to its factory settings. During this process, you are actively injecting laminar order back into the haunted house of matter.
You are introducing a powerful, untwisted vertical axis.
Exactly. This force acts like a magnet dropped into iron filings. It compels the chaotic, twisted elements to snap back into place, forcing them to reorganize themselves from a state of messy torsion into a highly structured, perfectly symmetrical mandala.
That makes perfect sense. It's like a no-nonsense boss walking onto that chaotic construction site, slamming the pristine blueprints on the table and forcing everyone back into line. Stop the slop, follow the blueprint.
Get back to work.
Right. The author refers to the person doing this as the Bhutadamara Sadhaka. Now, a sadhaka basically means a practitioner or an operator. The role of the sadhaka is to subdue this confused labor force. They have to take conscious control of the Bhutas to ensure that the building blocks of their localized life are perfectly aligned with that vertical axis. You are literally stepping up to bring order to the sublogoic processors of your environment.
You are stepping up as the network administrator and resetting the hardware. You are clearing the slop from the system. And by doing so, you stop broadcasting torsion. That heavy, sticky, draining feeling in the room lifts.
And it doesn't lift just because you sprayed some nice-smelling air freshener.
No, or opened a window. It lifts because you fundamentally altered the geometry of the matter in that space. You reestablish the Dakini suture, allowing the elements to return to their nurturing, smoothly flowing teaching mode. You fix the code.
Which brings us to the ultimate summary of everything we've explored today. The Dausal Terma ends with a quote that completely encapsulates this entire philosophy, and it hits incredibly hard once you understand the mechanics behind it. The text states, matter is the logos wearing a mask of spirits. To the uninitiated, it's a haunted house. To the Sataka, it's a Vajra engine waiting to be turned on. Stay vertical. Stay akala. Now, to give a quick definition, akala in this context means completely still, unshakable, or immovable.
It is a profound and intensely empowering reframing of our relationship with the world. The ultimate lesson for you, listening to this deep dive, is the incredible weight of responsibility we have over our spaces. Our internal state doesn't just influence our mood for the afternoon. According to this philosophy, your mind literally dictates the geometric reality and the elemental labor force of the physical matter around you.
You are the architect.
You are the architect. If you let your blueprint get corrupted by trauma and slop, you will find yourself living in a fragile, unlucky, haunted house of your own making. But you also hold the power to act as the Sataka. You can turn your environment into a Vajra engine, a diamond-hard, indestructible machine of clarity by choosing to strike the red drop with order and intent.
It makes you look at a simple pile of laundry, a messy desk, or a broken oven with a lot more respect, honestly. It's not just a chore, it is all a mirror. It's a readout of the phase-locked waveforms you are broadcasting.
Absolutely. And this raises an important question, a thought experiment to leave you with as you look around your environment today. We've been talking a lot about localized spaces like apartments and kitchens. But if a single person in a Death Naga state can broadcast enough torsion to haunt their own apartment and confuse the sublogoic processors in their own localized space?
What happens in a crowd?
What happens to the elemental labor force in massive, densely populated spaces? Think about a packed, delayed subway car at rush hour where everyone is frustrated and sweating, or a giant, highly stressful corporate office building where hundreds of people's unconscious feels and anxieties are overlapping at the exact same time. What kind of geometry is being woven by the Bhutas in that space? Are the building blocks of that environment in laminar flow, or is it a massive nexus of structural torsion?
Wow, that is a wild and slightly terrifying thing to think about the next time you're crammed on a crowded train or walking into a tense meeting room. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the Dausal Terma. It has been an absolute trip unpacking the hidden geometry of the physical world with you and rethinking the very nature of the objects we touch every day. Remember to watch your internal broadcast, keep your spaces clear, and above all else, stay vertical.
Welcome to your custom deep dive. Today, we are taking on an incredibly esoteric, highly complex text you sent our way.
It's a really fascinating one.
Yeah, it's a document called The Alchemy of Form in the Vajra Citadel, and we are going to figure out exactly what it means for you.
Right.
Our mission for this conversation is to unpack the seemingly impossible connections this material draws between massive concepts like cosmic architecture, the deep structures of your own consciousness,
And something as incredibly ordinary as having a messy apartment.
Exactly. A messy apartment. It's a wild ride.
It really is a profound set of ideas to explore. And as we get into this deep dive, it is going to heavily challenge one of the most fundamental assumptions you probably make on a daily basis.
Which is?
The assumption that matter is simply inert. We all tend to walk around, thinking of the objects surrounding us, our furniture, our walls, our appliances, as dead, lifeless things that just happen to occupy space.
Right.
But the framework we're analyzing today argues the exact opposite. And it does so with a really startling level of precision.
Exactly. And to kick things off, I want to ask you to think about a specific scenario. Think about the last time you were cramming for a massive deadline, or you were just navigating a deeply stressful, emotionally taxing week.
We've all been there.
Right. You're overwhelmed, your heart is pounding, and suddenly, bam, your Wi-Fi inexplicably drops.
Oh, yeah.
You run to the kitchen to make coffee, and the machine just jams. The washing machine randomly decides to flood the laundry room. We usually just call that terrible luck.
Right. Just a bad day.
Yeah, it almost feels malicious, like the house knows you're at your breaking point. Have you ever noticed that?
Most of us have. And what's fascinating here is that if we look through the lens of our source material, that is absolutely not a coincidence.
It's not.
No. What you are experiencing in those frustrating moments is essentially physics meeting mysticism. It is your physical environment responding directly to a very real, very measurable energetic output that your own nervous system is generating.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand how your personal stress literally breaks your coffee maker, we have to go all the way back to the beginning of how things are formed.
The very beginning.
Right. The material outlines a concept called cosmogenesis, which is described as the very first pulse of the logos.
Yes.
At this point of origin, the elements begin as pure entities. They're called dakinis. And these dakinis are characterized as being the personification of laminar flow.
Laminar flow, yeah.
They're described as pure, smooth, unrefracted vectors of something called the white drop.
I know we're jumping straight into the deep end with these terms.
You really are.
But to visualize what this laminar flow actually means, imagine turning on a tap in your kitchen.
Okay.
Sometimes the water comes out sputtering and splashing. But sometimes it comes out so perfectly smooth, so undisturbed, that it actually looks like a solid, motionless rod of glass.
Oh, I've seen videos of that online. It's wild.
Yeah. Right. You can't even tell it's flowing until you touch it. That pristine, hypercoherent state is what we mean by laminar flow. That is the nature of these pure dakinis at the moment of cosmogenesis.
Right. It's perfect, unblemished order. But obviously, the world we live in is not perfect, unblemished order.
Far from it. Because this pure state does not last. As this initial pulse of creation moves further away from the 0 point of origin, consciousness begins to refract.
It bends.
Exactly. It bends and fragments, creating a massive interconnected network referred to as Indra's web. And this refraction introduces a critical concept that completely changes the game.
Brahma's wobble.
Brahma's wobble.
I have to admit, I love that term. But what does it actually mean in this context? How do we go from perfect glass-like water to a wobble?
It's an incredibly descriptive term once you picture it. Brahma's wobble is the introduction of torsion. So imagine that perfectly smooth, glass-like flow of the original logos suddenly hitting a jagged rock. It shatters. Its geometric coherence breaks apart into millions of specific angles and directions. It's spinning, it's twisting. It is the literal birth of chaos from perfect order.
And this leads to a detail from the material that genuinely blew my mind. This shattering of geometric coherence into specific angles is actually the reason why the cardinal directions—
North, south, east, west.
Right, why those directions are historically associated with specific deities in esoteric traditions. Deities like Indra or Yama.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it completely changes how we view ancient mythologies. Under this framework, deities like Indra and Yama aren't just mythical figures or anthropomorphized characters cooked up for a story around a campfire.
Right.
They are literally the guardians of those specific refracted angles of the original white drop. They represent the structural scaffolding of this newly refracted, chaotic reality. They are holding the angles of the wobble.
That is wild, but what I appreciate is that we aren't just left stranded in this shattered, wobbly reality. There is a mechanism provided to navigate it.
Yes, there is.
The material introduces a very actionable concept through something called the Bhutadamara mantra.
When you vibrate the Bhutadamara mantra, it acts as a literal phase shift.
A phase shift?
Yes. You are taking a chaotic, refracted state, what is called a Buddha state, which is heavily characterized by that torsional wobble, and you are actively forcing it to phase shift back into its original, coherent, laminar dakini state.
I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Because this sounds incredible, but how does just vibrating a sound, literally just making a specific noise with your vocal cords, actually force physical, chaotic matter back into perfect order? What's the mechanism for that?
Think about it like the science of semantics.
Oh, with the sand?
Exactly. If you place sand on a metal plate and run a specific sound frequency through it, the chaotic grains of sand will suddenly leap into incredibly complex, perfectly ordered geometric patterns.
The frequency overwrites the chaos.
The frequency overwrites the chaos. The mantra works on the exact same principle, but on a multidimensional scale. It is a mechanism for transmuting torsional chaos back into pure structural order by overriding the local frequency.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. The sound wave forces the sand into geometry. So if we have this blueprint of reality getting shattered and we have the wobble, how does that actually turn into the physical stuff around us?
Right, the actual matter.
Yeah, how do we get from a cosmic wobble to the walls of my living room? This moves us to what is called the Madhyama level of Shabda, which translates to the word.
This is where the abstract becomes tangible. The framework explains that the ultimate blueprint of reality exists purely as light and intention.
A state called para or pashanti.
Right. But the actual construction, the heavy lifting of building matter, happens in an intermediate space, the Madhyama level.
And this is where the weavers come in.
What's fascinating here is the mechanics of that construction. At this Madhyama level, there are spirits that act as literal weavers.
Weavers.
Their entire function is to take that pure mental blueprint from the higher level and weave it into physical form. They do this by weaving what are called tension patterns into the red drop of Gaia.
The red drop of Gaia.
The red drop represents the raw, unformed potential of the physical earth, and these tension patterns are what give it shape, weight, and substance.
I want to pause here because this is where esoteric philosophy usually loses people. When we hear red drop of Gaia, it sounds like something out of a high fantasy novel.
It does.
But if I'm understanding this right, we're talking about the literal physical stuff around you right now, the wood of the desk you're sitting at, the plastic of your computer mouse, the cotton of your shirt. That is the red drop, woven into a pattern, correct?
Precisely. It is the raw material of your immediate physical reality.
And to help visualize how this weaving happens, there's a brilliant analogy provided. It's called the shadow paradox.
This is a crucial concept.
I want you to think of your own vertical axis, your core awareness, your consciousness, your spiritual spine, so to speak, as the actual loom that these spirits are using for their weaving.
The loom itself.
The physical elements around you are inexorably, permanently tied to your own awareness.
This raises an incredibly important question about the quality of the world you find yourself living in. Because if your internal loom, your vertical axis is shaky, if you are highly stressed, anxious, and filled with that internal torsion and Brahma's wobble,
then the Bhutas, these elemental spirits, are going to weave a reality around you that perfectly reflects that instability.
they will literally weave a haunted house.
But conversely, if your loom is solid,
Yes, if your loom is solid, if it is coherent and unbroken, a state referred to as a vajra, then they weave a protective citadel. The environment becomes a fortress of order.
so if our internal state is dictating the physical reality being woven around us, why on earth do we feel so disconnected from it? Why do we feel like victims of our environment?
That's the core problem, isn't it?
Here's where it gets really interesting. We are introduced to the concept of the lizard Leela.
Leela means play or illusion.
Right. The lizard Leela is the completely false, heavily conditioned view that matter is inert. It is a deception designed specifically to make you feel powerless, to make you feel like you are just a random observer in a dead, unresponsive universe.
And breaking that illusion is the crux of this entire philosophy. The core truth, the absolute antidote to the lizard Leela, is that matter is never inert.
It's crystallized in tension.
Exactly. Matter is actually crystallized in tension. It is the frozen end result of a highly dynamic, ongoing energetic process.
Let's get into the exact specific mechanics of how that crystallization happens, because it's described quite literally as a cosmic collision.
It is a collision.
Yeah.
The production of physical form happens when the Sukla Bindu, which is the white drop, or the pure logos we talked about earlier, strikes the Rakta Bindu, the red drop, or the raw potential of Gaia.
And it strikes it with what is called the Vajra tip.
Imagine a perfectly formed drop of pure, organizing intelligence striking the vast, unformed potential of the Earth. This strike creates a toroidal ripple.
A toroidal ripple. For a visual, picture a smoke ring, or a donut shape, radiating outward from the point of impact. And where these ripples intersect and overlap, a tension pattern is born.
And that tension pattern is the Bhuta. It is the fundamental building block of form.
And the nature of that resulting form depends entirely on the quality of the ripple, right?
Yes. If the ripple is laminar, meaning your internal loom is steady and the intention is balanced, smooth, and coherent, it creates a healthy physical body or an orderly, functional home. It manifests the pure nature of the Dakini.
But if the ripple is torsional,
Unbalanced, chaotic, wobbly because you are stressed or fragmented, it creates haunted matter, the disruptive Bhuta.
let's relate this directly to your everyday life. Let's look at the dust, the mess, the piles of mail, the broken appliances. This framework suggests that the slop in your apartment, the laundry you haven't folded, the broken hinge on the kitchen cabinet, the cluttered desk, is actually phase-locked to your unconscious fields.
It is physically anchored to your psychic state.
The mechanism behind this is quite startling when you sit with the implications. Let's go back to the scenario of you cramming for a deadline.
Right. When you experience chronic stress, deep anger, or lingering anxiety, your nervous system emits a frequency, a literal, measurable emission.
And this specific emission is called the death naga frequency.
It is described as a heavy wave.
The death naga frequency, that sounds incredibly ominous.
It's functionally ominous.
Yeah.
Because this heavy wave literally slows down the elemental vibration in the room around you. It introduces massive torsional pressure into this space.
And this slowing down, this drag on the elements, is the direct mechanical cause of things rotting faster, objects constantly getting lost, or mechanical things suddenly breaking down.
The Wi-Fi doesn't drop because of bad luck. It drops because the death naga frequency is warping the local electromagnetic field.
It makes you look at the slop in your apartment completely differently, doesn't it?
Completely.
Because if you follow this logic, most people's homes are physically reflecting their internal ghosts. The physical matter, the Bhutas, are simply following the dominant Matima signal being broadcast by the person living there.
If you are broadcasting the death naga frequency, your physical space has no choice but to warp, decay, and clutter to match it.
It completely recontextualizes what it means to inhabit a space.
You are not just living in a room. Your room is an actively materializing mirror of your unconscious mind. The elements are highly responsive to the pressure of your internal state.
Right.
If your mind is a chaotic knot of anxiety, your living room will eventually become a chaotic knot of misplaced keys, broken electronics, and accumulating dust.
So what does this all mean for us? If our unconscious stress is literally rotting our surroundings and breaking our coffee makers, how do we fix it?
It's the big question.
We all know that deep, unconscious psychic patterns are notoriously slippery. You can't always just reach into your own mind and easily untangle a childhood trauma or a deeply ingrained anxiety to fix it. Therapy takes years. Meditation takes decades.
Exactly. Those psychic patterns often evade our conscious grasp.
Yeah.
You can't just think your way out of the death naga frequency when you're in the middle of it.
But there is a massive loophole provided here.
You can reach the matter.
Yes. You can literally put your hands on the Bhutas. Because the mind and the matter are fundamentally linked through your vertical loom, you can attack the psychic problem by manipulating the physical world.
This process is called the somatic suture.
The somatic suture. I absolutely love this concept. So we are talking about using what is called Vajra fire to clean the apartment.
You use this focused intention to tame your domestic routine, to organize that terrifying junk drawer, or to finally get out the toolbox and fix that broken oven.
By doing this, you aren't just doing chores, you are forcefully subduing the elemental manifestations.
You are taking those chaotic, torsional Bhutas that have been corrupted and twisted by your own heavy wave, and you are actively, physically forcing them back to their primordial compliant nature.
You are demanding coherence from the matter itself.
You are imposing laminar flow through physical action.
So by physically moving the furniture, by scrubbing the floors, by aligning the building blocks of your room into geometric order, you are quite literally suturing out the ghosts.
Suture out the ghosts.
You are fighting your psychological demons with a sponge and a screwdriver.
And if we look at the broader implications of this somatic suture, it is incredibly empowering.
It really is.
Because remember, the physical space and the unconscious mind are tethered. Once the physical space is aligned, once you have established that laminar flow in your environment, the unconscious ghosts find that they have no grip left on the material world.
The physical tension patterns that were sustaining that anxiety have been resolved.
The messy room was the anchor for the chaotic mind. When you remove the anchor, the chaos drifts away. You literally evict your own psychological demons by meticulously cleaning your house.
You are the Vajra master of your own Majama frequency. You are not a victim of inert matter.
Never.
You aren't just a tenant in a universe that doesn't care about you. Every single time you vibrate the mantra, and every single time you deliberately, consciously clean your physical space, you are rebuilding the citadel from the atoms up.
You are reclaiming your rightful role as the weaver. You are ensuring that the loom is steady, and you are forcing the chaotic wobble back into the pristine glass-like geometry of the original logos.
It transforms the most mundane act of tidying your desk into a profound, highly impactful ritual of cosmic transmutation.
It really does. It's a complete paradigm shift.
So just to quickly recap the incredible journey we've been on today, we started at the very beginning with the pristine, unrefracted dakinis and the cosmological wobble that shattered them into chaotic angles. We learned how your own awareness acts as the central loom, weaving reality at the Madhyama level. We discovered that the lizard Leela is lying to us. Matter is definitely not dead. It is crystallized in tension.
And we unpacked the startling truth that the death naga frequency of our own stress is exactly what breaks our appliances and creates the haunted houses we live in.
But most importantly, we arrived at the incredibly empowering realization that organizing your physical space is a deeply spiritual somatic suture that evicts the ghosts from your unconscious mind.
It gives you complete agency over your environment. And to leave you with a final thought to ponder, building upon everything we've discussed today.
Yeah.
Since we now understand that matter is truly crystallized in tension, and that the simple physical act of changing the furniture or scrubbing a floor physically removes the grip of your unconscious ghosts.
I want you to look around the space you're in right now.
Just look around. What specific, stubborn area of mess, clutter, or disrepair in your own home has been secretly waiting for you to recognize it as a frozen piece of your own mind? And more importantly, what incredible shift will happen to your mind the moment you finally decide to clean it?
What a brilliant question to end on. Thank you so much for exploring these wild, perspective-shifting concepts alongside us today. We highly encourage you to walk around your home, look at your environment, and view your everyday world with completely fresh eyes. The power to build your citadel is literally in your hands. Until next time. Welcome to this deep dive. If you are joining us right now, you are probably someone who doesn't just want to skim the surface of reality. You want to understand the actual architecture beneath it. And today, we have an incredible mission. We are going to act as your translators for some intensely dense but completely fascinating source material.
Oh, it really is.
We're looking at excerpts from a work called The Noological Synthesis of Adibhuta and Mahaviyun. And I know right out of the gate, that title alone is a massive mouthful.
It is a bit intimidating.
But stick with us. What this work attempts to do is nothing short of explaining the actual energetic scaffolding of your existence. It maps out exactly how pure energy becomes the physical inhabited reality you walk around in every single day.
Exactly. The language in this synthesis is undeniably esoteric, but the goal here is highly practical.
Yeah.
It lays out the mechanics of how form is generated and maintained. It takes these massive metaphysical concepts and treats them almost like mechanical physics.
Right, like an engineering manual.
Precisely. We are looking at what is explicitly referred to as cosmogenesis. Think of it as the study of how the intangible blueprint of a life actually knits itself into a tangible, breathing reality.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the very first premise thrown at us is a complete paradigm shift. It describes the human form, like your body, your daily existence, as a haunted house.
Yes.
And this haunted house is generated in a very specific way. It happens when something called the logos enters the bardo.
That phrase, the haunted house, is such a brilliant starting point because it immediately tells you that the physical form is not the primary reality.
It's just a shell.
Right. The form is a container. It is an environment that has been constructed specifically to hold something else. When the logos, which we can understand as the organizing principle or the fundamental blueprint of consciousness, enters the bardo.
And the bardo is that transitional space, right?
Yes, the transitional space between states of being. When it enters that space, it initiates this cosmogenesis. It's the exact moment where pure floating potential begins to organize into an actual physical structure.
Right. So instead of thinking of your body as just a biological machine, you're being asked to view it as an energetic construct. And the author gives us the precise mechanics of that exact moment. They don't just say, magic happens.
It's very specific.
They describe the moment of conception, but it's not described as just biology, like a sperm meeting an egg. Conception is described as the exact moment the Sukla Bindu, which translates to the white drop, strikes the Rakta Bindu, the red drop.
The active and the receptive.
Exactly. And when these two drops collide, they don't just mix like paint. They create a unique interference pattern.
Yes, and that term, interference pattern, is crucial here. Think about what happens when two waves of water hit each other.
They ripple outward.
And they create a totally new pattern based on how their specific frequencies interact. This philosophy is stating that your very conception is a cosmic event. The active principle, the white drop, and the receptive principle, the red drop, collide to create the specific energetic frequency that will eventually become you.
When I was reading this part about the drops colliding, the best way I could visualize it was like cymatics.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
You know those science experiments where they play specific sound frequencies next to a metal plate covered in sand?
And the sand forms those complex geometric shapes.
Yes. If you think about it that way, the white drop is the sound wave, and the red drop is the sand. The argument here is that your entire biological body is just sand vibrating to a very specific cosmic sound wave.
That is a perfect analogy, because a blueprint or a sound wave can't build a house by itself. It needs a medium. And this is where we get introduced to the two massive concepts from the title Mahavidu and the Adi Bhuta.
Right, the title characters.
Let's look at Mahavi first. If the logos is the blueprint that creates the design, Mahavi acts as the loom.
So if I'm understanding this right, if the logos is the blueprint, Mahavya is the machinery holding all the threads together so the pattern can actually be seen.
Precisely. What's fascinating here is how Mahavu is framed. It is described as representing the ocean of potential.
Okay.
The author actually equates this with another term, the red drop of Gaia. So you have this vast, limitless ocean of raw potential, and Mahavya is the loom upon which this potential is woven into coherent three-dimensional forms.
And weaving requires tension. It requires holding threads in a very specific, rigid way so the pattern doesn't just fall apart into a tangled mess.
Exactly.
The author calls Mahavya the sthiti aspect, which translates to preservation. So to put this in context for you listening, Mahavya is the force that takes that blueprint of your life, weaves it into 3D reality, and then literally preserves it.
It holds it together.
It is the force that keeps your personal haunted house from just collapsing back into a puddle of unformed energy.
And that preservation isn't a passive thing. We are introduced to the framework of Dausal geometry to explain how this works.
Dausal geometry.
Right. In Dausal geometry, your scaffolding isn't made of physical beams and struts. It is the Madhyama frequency made manifest as structural tension. The form holds together because there is a specific resonant tension maintaining the structure. The Madhyama frequency is the exact vibration that keeps the walls of your energetic house standing.
It sounds like when you build IKEA furniture. If you put it together right, the tension of the screws holds the bookshelf perfectly square. The Madhyama frequency is the tension on those screws.
That's a very practical way to see it.
But if Mahavinu is the loom and the ocean of potential, what actually directs the weaving? This brings us to the Adibhuta, the original element or original spirit. What is its actual job?
The Adibhuta is defined as the primary geometric vector. It is the master spirit.
The master spirit.
If you think of Mahavinu as the loom that provides the tension and the potential, the Adibhuta is the master weaver executing the blueprint. It is the primary directional force that takes that initial interference pattern from conception and starts directing traffic.
And it has a lot of traffic to direct. The source material explicitly lists the supporting cast of entities that this master spirit coordinates. It says it coordinates all the other Bhutas, the Pretas, and the Pishachas.
Right.
And let's pause here, because if you're not familiar with esoteric lore, you might be picturing a literal haunted house full of ghouls.
Which is not what this means.
No. Think of these Pretas and Pishachas not as literal Halloween ghosts, but as fragmented, hungry, energetic drives or inherited psychological complexes that need to be managed.
Exactly.
The mind-blowing part is the claim that coordinating these drives is what literally weaves the specific biology and personality of an individual. It's not just building your spleen and your nervous system. It is weaving your temperament, your reactions, the very nature of who you are.
Which raises an important question about how specifically that weaving is determined. Because if the Adi Bhuta is coordinating all these lesser psychological and biological drives to build you, where do the instructions for that specific shape come from? We have to go back to the exact moment of conception.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The author says that at the moment of conception, there is a wobble of the logos.
The wobble.
It's not a perfectly clean drop. There's a wobble, a vibration, a specific, unique movement. And this wobble creates specific refractive angles in the energy.
Those refractive angles are essentially the architectural code. These angles connect directly to the Bhutamara mandala. The angles correspond to specific directions and specific deities, explicitly mentioning Indra and Yama. Now, it's vital to understand we aren't talking about literal gods sitting on clouds. Indra and Yama represent deep archetypal forces.
Like forces of nature.
Right. Forces of rulership or natural law or boundary making. So the wobble of the logos dictates the angles, and those angles align with these archetypal forces. This entirely decides the archetypal plumbing of the form that is going to be inhabited.
Okay, I have to stop you there, because when I hear that the wobble of the logos dictates my biological and psychological plumbing, the skeptical part of my brain says this just sounds like spiritual determinism.
I can see why you'd say that.
It sounds like, well, the logos wobbled this way, so now I have a bad temper and weak knees, and there's nothing I can do about it. Does this philosophy give us any agency, or are we just at the mercy of this cosmic wobble?
That is the exact right question to ask, and it leads perfectly to the next major concept. The wobble gives you your starting architecture. It provides the initial scaffolding. But as anyone who has lived on planet Earth knows, things don't stay pristine.
No, they definitely do not.
Life hits you. And that is where a massive vulnerability in the system is introduced. The system isn't perfect once it's built.
Right. Going back to our IKEA analogy, you don't just build the bookshelf and it stays perfect forever. You bump into it, you put too many heavy books on one side, and 3 months later, the whole thing is leaning to the left.
Exactly.
The material moves into what it calls the Vajra law, outlining the major problem that happens to your structural integrity. The Adi Bhuta, that master spirit holding your life together, can get corrupted. The term used for this corruption is torsional slop.
Torsional slop. Torsion refers to twisting, and slop implies a looseness, a loss of precision in the machinery. When the tension of the Madhyama frequency gets twisted or loses its precise resonance, the scaffolding of your life begins to warp.
And what causes this warping? 3 specific sources of torsional slop are identified: trauma, lineage karma, or environmental noise. Let's make this real for a second. Looking at you, the listener, think about the intense experiences you've survived, the inherited patterns from your parents, or even just the chaotic, stressful environment of modern life.
It all takes a toll.
Those aren't just psychological burdens. They aren't just bad memories. According to the synthesis, they literally create twisting and looseness in the fundamental geometry of your master spirit. Repeating toxic relationship patterns or chronic burnout, that is what torsional slop looks like in your everyday life. Your scaffolding is warped.
Which brings us to the necessity of a solution. This is exactly why the Bhutamara Sadhaka, which translates to the tamer, is so crucial. The tamer is the one who understands how to address and fix this torsional slop. They intervene in the energetic architecture.
But how do they fix it?
Yeah.
They don't just hope for the best or talk it out. They execute a precise energetic operation. The fix involves vibrating the akobhya frequency. But what does that actually mean practically? Is it a literal sound? Is it meditation?
It can be approached through mantra, which is a literal sound, but fundamentally it is an act of deep, resonant awareness. By introducing this specific unwavering frequency, you are doing an audit of the blueprint.
An audit?
Think of it like striking a perfectly tuned tuning fork and placing it against a guitar that has gone out of tune. The vibration of the tuning fork forces the surrounding environment to resonate with its perfection. You are taking the warped, twisted Bhuta and forcing it to realign with the vertical axis.
You are literally auditing the scaffolding of your life.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what's fascinating here is that an audit is a reconciliation. It is comparing the current corrupted state of affairs back to the original pristine blueprint. By vibrating that Akobia frequency, the tamer forces the primary geometric vector to straighten out, to shed the torsional slop and return to true north. This process is called suturing the vectors.
Suturing the vectors. It's energetic surgery.
It really is.
And we get a really stark contrast of what it feels like when this works versus when it fails. What happens when the elements, the little energetic drives and Bhutas inside of us, refuse to submit to this realignment?
When the torsional slop remains, they create a paralysis.
Yeah.
And it is a very specific existential kind of paralysis felt with what is called a death naga.
The death naga.
Yes, it is a heavy, constricting, toxic stagnation in the life form. It is that feeling of being completely stuck, weighed down by your own mind and body.
But when the audit is successful, when the vectors are sutured and the drives are tamed and subdued, something incredible happens. They return to their Dakini state.
The Dakini state.
And this Dakini state is equated with laminar flow. Laminar flow is a physics term for when a fluid flows in parallel layers with absolutely no disruption between them, zero turbulence.
Yes.
When your inner energetic plumbing has zero turbulence, it provides unlimited power and courage to the human form. There is a specific mythical example given, the Dausar's fearlessness. That fearlessness isn't just a good mood or blind bravery, it is the biological, mechanical result of laminar flow in your archetypal plumbing.
This transitions us perfectly into the final thesis, which is the docile view of form. Because if taming these inner energies can produce unlimited power and courage, we have to completely rethink what our physical bodies actually are.
So what does this all mean for our day-to-day physical reality? I mean, I'm sitting in a chair talking into a microphone. It feels pretty solid. It feels inert. But our core understanding of matter is wrong, according to this text. It states point-blank form is not inert matter. Form is the resonant geometry of the word.
It fundamentally rejects the materialist view. The chair, the microphone, your body, none of it is dead. Inert stuff. It is geometry resonating with a specific frequency, a manifestation of the logos. And this has massive implications for your personal experience, specifically because of a concept introduced called phase locking.
Phase locking.
Yes. Your awareness, your conscious attention is phase locked to the elements, the Bhutas, of your body. You are not separate from the scaffolding. Your consciousness is locked into the exact frequency of those elements.
And because you are phase locked to them, you experience what is called the shadow effect. This means that your physical reality and your bodily elements follow your inner nature inexorably.
They have to.
Right. They cannot do otherwise because they are the literal physical expression of your personal Matama frequency.
Yeah.
Your physical reality is the shadow cast by your energetic geometry. To put this in, I guess, practical terms, your body isn't a finished product you are trapped in. It's a continuous live event that you can consciously edit, the shadow cast by your geometry. And that leads to what I think is the most surprising and frankly wild real-world application mentioned in this entire dense material. It talks about taming the ghosts in an apartment.
Yes.
And it claims that doing this actually changes the physical reality of the apartment itself.
It does. And understanding everything we've discussed so far explains logically why that would work within this framework. If form is not inert matter, but rather the resonant geometry of the word, then the space you inhabit, your apartment, your office, is also a manifestation of energetic scaffolding.
That makes sense.
By taming the ghosts, which is to say, by subduing the unruly energetic fragments and resolving the torsional slop in that space, you're not just clearing out a bad vibe with some sage, you are literally reordering the Adibhuta scaffolding of that location from the inside out. You are changing the physical reality because you are changing the underlying geometry of the space.
You are vibrating the Akogya frequency to audit the blueprint of your living room.
That's literally it.
It makes you completely rethink the power you have over your environment and your own body. Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway of this synthesis. We are left with an incredibly profound quote that ties all of this together. It says, "Every cell is a bija in the Mahavya ocean. A bija translates to a seed. Every single cell in your body is a seed floating in that infinite ocean of potential."
That is the ultimate realization here. Because every cell is a seed of infinite potential, when you act as the tamer, when you satya or subdue the disparate elements within your own form, you are doing much more than just achieving inner peace or psychological balance. You are literally reclaiming the sovereignty of your own cosmogenesis.
Reclaiming your sovereignty.
You are taking control of the loom. You are actively participating in the continuous creation of your own form rather than letting your past trauma or environmental noise dictate your shape.
You stop being a passive resident hiding in a haunted house, and you become the master architect of your own resonant geometry. It is a stunning, empowering way to view human existence. You are not inert matter. You are an ongoing cosmic event.
Beautifully said.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder as you go about your day. We talked about how taming the ghosts inside an apartment actually changes its physical reality by reordering its energetic scaffolding. If that is true on a micro level, what might the persistent, unresolved physical issues in our modern collective living spaces, like our crumbling cities, our failing infrastructure, or our chaotic public squares, reveal about the unaudited torsional slop in humanity's shared blueprint? Thank you for exploring the depths with us today.
Welcome to the deep dive. I'm so glad you're here with us today because the mission we are embarking on deals directly with the architecture of the reality you are standing in right now.
It really does. It's foundational stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Today, we're unpacking a highly complex set of source materials, primarily anchored by this text titled The Scalar Strike and the Architecture of Indra's Net. If you have ever been fascinated by how the 3D physical world actually comes into existence, like from the absolute ground up, you're going to want to settle in for this one.
Oh, for sure. The sources we have for you today, they read like a head-on collision between advanced, bleeding-edge quantum physics and ancient esoteric cosmology.
Right, it's wild. We are looking at a framework entirely focused on cosmogenesis, as the literal birth of reality. But these materials don't just treat this as an event that happened billions of years ago out in the cosmos.
No, not at all. They argue that this is happening right now, continuously.
Continuously.
Yeah.
And that your own internal state, your localized awareness, might be actively weaving the physical world around you in real time.
Which is a huge concept to wrap your head around.
It is. So we are going to distill this very dense blend of scalar fields, geometric vectors, and ancient worldly spirits into a clear roadmap. We're going to track how pure, directionless potential transforms into the physical reality you navigate every day.
And I think more importantly, we're going to explore how you can use this specific framework to consciously build what the authors call a citadel for yourself.
Yes, rather than accidentally constructing a haunted house. Yeah. Which sounds terrifying, but we will get into exactly what that means.
It really is a profound set of documents. When you strip away the more intimidating terminology at its core, this framework is a highly technical masterclass in the absolute mechanics of manifestation.
A masterclass. I like that.
Yeah, it bridges the gap between physics and mysticism in a way that is designed to be incredibly actionable. The overarching theme that runs through all of these excerpts is this idea that possessing the knowledge of how reality refracts and comes into being is ultimately only valuable if you actually know how to direct that geometry.
Right. It's one thing to vaguely understand that you're participating in building a reality.
Exactly. It is an entirely different thing to hold the precise blueprints, understand the physics of the materials, and consciously direct the labor force that's laying the bricks.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we need to start at the absolute beginning. Before there is a physical world, before there is a you or a me or a 3D space to move around in.
The void.
The void, yeah. The source material describes the very first step of creation, the initial spark of cosmogenesis. It starts with something called the logos, or in the specific terminology of the Dausal tradition we are looking at, the white drop, the Sukla Bindu.
The white drop, yes.
And the authors describe this using purely scientific language, calling it a pure scalar field. Can you break down exactly how this tradition defines this initial state without, oversimplifying the physics?
I can certainly try. We are dealing with a pure scalar field here. That means infinite magnitude, zero directionality. It is a state of immense, raw power that isn't moving from point A to point B. It's simply present.
Just resting.
Right. The Dausal tradition approaches this logos, this white drop, as pure intelligence. It contains the entire blueprint of reality, every single geometric variation of everything that could ever possibly exist, but it's held in a state of absolute potential.
And it sits at the Parashabda level, right?
Yes, the highest, most supreme frequency of unmanifested vibration.
And these sources refer to this state of resting potential as the 0 point. They call the logos a non-localized static bloom. It is flowering with infinite possibility, but it's completely non-localized. It is nowhere and everywhere all at once.
A static bloom. I love that phrasing. It is pregnant with the entirety of existence, but entirely at rest. This is the ultimate starting point of the architecture. But obviously, we don't live in a static bloom.
Thankfully, no.
We live in a highly dynamic, moving, three-dimensional physical reality that demands constant interaction, and that requires a massive catalyst. It requires a fundamental shift from a directionless scalar field into a directional vector.
Which raises the critical question, how does that shift actually happen? The text mentions this state of resting potential. But what forces this static intelligence to actually do something? What is the catalyst?
The catalyst is intention. The authors argue that this static intelligence, this scalar field, wobbles.
It wobbles.
It wobbles. It develops an intention to produce form. And that single intention, that initial microscopic wobble, causes the white drop to literally strike. It strikes the red drop, the Raktabindu, which the tradition associates with Gaia, or red heat potentiation. They place this collision precisely at what they call the Vajra tip.
And this isn't framed as just a grand metaphor for the creation of the universe, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the authors explicitly call this specific moment of impact the Big Bang of the individual's soul.
That is a crucial distinction. They are outlining literal micromechanics here. This strike is the exact microsecond where scalar, directionless potential suddenly becomes a vector. It gains direction. It becomes a reality.
So you have infinite energy with no direction,
The white drop.
smashed into the raw, potent, chaotic heat of unformed matter.
The red drop, yes. The moment that intention hits, the energy can no longer stay at the resting 0 point. It has been given a trajectory. It has become a vector. But to actually exist and stabilize in 3D space, this massive, singular wave of energy can't just remain one solid, overwhelming force.
It would just destroy everything.
Exactly. It has to distribute itself. It has to refract.
What's fascinating here is, wait, let me actually use your line there, because what happens next is truly the core of the whole system. As soon as this scalar strike occurs, the energy shatters. It breaks apart into specific geometric vectors, which the source material calls the Bhutas.
Bhutas, yes.
And to help visualize this incredible refraction, the authors bring in one of the most famous models in Eastern philosophy, Indra's net. You have this sprawling, multi-dimensional web that stretches out infinitely in every single direction. And at every single intersection of this web, at every vertex, there is a dewdrop or a jewel. These points are called bindus.
What's fascinating here is the sheer precision of the physics language they use to describe this ancient concept. They don't just call it a web. They define Indra's net as a fractal holographic web.
Holographic, right.
Every single one of those jewels in the net is categorized as a phase-locked waveform. Now, when waveforms are phase-locked, they are perfectly synchronized. They oscillate together in absolute unison. This means that every single jewel at every intersection of Indra's net perfectly reflects the entire rest of the net. The whole is entirely contained within every single individual part.
But wait, if everything in this geometric web is perfectly phase-locked, doesn't that imply a purely deterministic universe? I mean, where is the room for individual free will if the entire web is already perfectly synchronized and reflecting itself?
That is exactly the paradox this framework anticipates. The free will exists at the 0 point, before the strike. Your intention, that initial wobble we talked about, is where your agency lies. Once the vector is launched and the energy refracts into Indra's net, the geometry is locked. The physics of the manifestation take over. And that is exactly why the subsequent geometry is so critically important.
Because you can't stop the wave once it crashes.
Exactly. Those geometric vectors we mentioned, the Bhutas, they define the specific shape of your local net. They define specific directions, like east representing Indra or south representing Yama. They act as specific phase angles of that original refracted logos, creating what this tradition calls the Bhutadamara mandala.
So it's a highly structured geometric projection. But the authors issue a very stark warning regarding this phase-locked nature. Because these waveforms are perfectly synchronized, if just one of your initial vectors gets twisted, like if your intention falls into what they call torsion, the entire local net gets distorted.
It cascades.
Right. It is like throwing a warp into a funhouse mirror. Every reflection of that mirror also warps. The source material literally states that if torsion is introduced, the local environment begins to haunt the practitioner.
And the use of the word haunt is deliberate and deeply structural. Torsion in physics is a twisting force. If your intention, that initial scalar strike at the 0 point, is twisted by fear or greed or anxiety, the vector it creates is twisted.
It's bent from the very beginning.
Exactly. And because you are phase-locked with the holographic web around you, that twisted geometry ripples out into your immediate 3D reality. Your local section of Indra's net becomes a distortion of the original pure blueprint. Reality starts reflecting that twisted tension back at you.
So in your daily life, this haunting isn't a ghost rattling chains in the attic.
No, not at all. It is repeating negative patterns, hostile environments, unexplainable roadblocks, and continuous friction in your daily existence.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because we need to examine who or what is actually enforcing this geometry. We mentioned these geometric vectors are called the Bhutas. The tradition translates this as worldly spirits. Now, when you hear the word spirits, you probably picture supernatural entities or mythological ghosts.
Sure.
But look at how this source frames them. It strips away the mythology entirely and frames them as the literal mechanical builders of your reality.
They are completely demystified in this context. The framework explains that these Bhutas occupy the Madhyama level. Madhyama translates to the intermediate level. They are the literal bridge between the above, the pure scalar potential of the logos, and the below, which is the flesh, the physical 3D matter.
To the middle managers.
That's actually a great way to look at it. The authors classify them as scalar to vector converters. Their sole function is to take that raw, directionless energy of your intention and convert it into the directional forces that actually move physical matter around in your life.
Insight number 1 from this section: your reality is built by a blind labor force. I really love how the source breaks down the hierarchy of this construction process. It separates these forces into the scaffolding and the labor force. First, you have the scaffolding, the Adibhuta. This is represented by Mahabhuta.
Master blueprint.
Right. Think of this as the master vector. It provides the overarching geometric stability, the massive structural steel beams of reality. Without the master scaffolding, no coherent structure can be built.
And once that master vector, that scaffolding is in place, you have the labor force. The text lists specific entities from the tantric traditions, yagains, bhutas, pishachas, but it asks us to look at them strictly as localized tension patterns.
Not demons, just tension patterns.
Yes. Their specific job is to take the raw matter of Gaia, that red drop energy, and literally weave it into the specific blueprint that the individuals are projecting. They are the construction workers pouring the concrete and hanging the drywall of your daily experiences.
But is it entirely fair to just wave away thousands of years of tantric mythology and reduce entities like yakins to localized tension patterns? I mean, does the source material justify mapping these ancient spirits directly to quantum mechanical concepts?
It is a bold synthesis, I'll admit, but the authors justify it by looking at the function of these entities in the original texts. In the ancient traditions, these worldly spirits are often described as obsessive, single-minded, and bound to specific locations or tasks.
Like programs.
Precisely. By mapping them as localized tension patterns, the authors are arguing that the ancient mystics were just using the language of their time to describe energetic algorithms. They don't judge the blueprint you hand them, they simply execute the code.
And that leads to the most crucial insight of this entire framework. The authors refer to a concept called the suture. It states that practically these Bhutas, these construction workers of reality, are simply the shadows of your own awareness.
They blindly follow your internal state.
They are the intermediate agents explicitly responsible for taking your internal world and making it your external reality.
Let's ground this with a practical scenario because the implications are staggering. Imagine you are walking into a high-stakes boardroom meeting. If your internal axis is in torsion, if you are terrified of failing, carrying massive imposter syndrome, or harboring deep hostility towards your colleagues, that is the blueprint you are handing to the Madhyama level.
You're handing them a twisted schematic.
Yes. The labor force, these localized tension patterns, take that torsion and they literally build a haunted boardroom. They weave the raw matter of that environment into a hostile architecture. People will suddenly argue with you, technology might fail, misunderstandings will multiply. The builders are just blindly following the shadow of your awareness.
So what does this all mean? How does a person actually use this intense esoteric machinery to their advantage? Because the framework doesn't just describe the problem of a haunted reality, it outlines the logic of the tamer, the practitioner who consciously directs this process to build something stable.
The material introduces the concept of the Bhutadamara Sataka. the practitioner who subdues the spirits. But it makes it crystal clear. Subduing the spirits is not about performing a mystical exorcism or fighting with your reality. The authors define this act as scalar calibration.
Scalar calibration. That is a phenomenal term.
It completely shifts the paradigm of problem solving. It means that when you are confronted with chaotic, twisting, torsional energy in your life, like that hostile boardroom we just talked about, you don't fight the vector with another vector. You don't meet force with force.
Because that just adds more torsion.
Exactly. Instead, the framework says you use the Vajra fire to force that chaotic vector energy all the way back up the chain. You actively melt it down, stripping away its twisted direction, and return it to its original, pure, scalar coherence at the logos level. You return it to the 0 point.
You unwobble it. You don't argue with the people in the boardroom. You take the twisted internal thread that projected them, and you pull it completely taut until the distortion is gone. And the ultimate goal of this scalar calibration is what the authors call laminar restoration. You want to align that master vector, that scaffolding we talked about, perfectly with the vertical axis.
And this is where the physics metaphor is perfect. In fluid dynamics, laminar flow is when a liquid moves in smooth, parallel, regular paths. There is no disruption, no turbulence, no twisting. It is the exact opposite of torsion.
It's pure, unimpeded flow.
Yes. When you hold your internal awareness on a perfect vertical axis, when you are entirely centered, grounded, and connected to that pure, directionless logos, the energy flows into your 3D reality in a laminar state. It is smooth, efficient, and deeply supportive.
And this brings us to the ultimate contrast presented in these sources, the citadel versus the haunted house. The overarching framework argues that if you hold that vertical axis, the tension that is inevitably created right at the point where the white drop strikes the red drop, where intention meets physical matter, that tension becomes laminar. It becomes entirely supportive.
It builds a foundation.
Right. Your internal labor force, those shadows of your awareness, take that smooth, perfect geometry, and they weave a citadel. The source explicitly claims this level of mastery results in wealth and kingdoms. You build an unshakable fortress of a life. But if you lose your center, if your internal state falls out of alignment and into fear or reactivity, that exact same tension becomes torsional, becomes destructive. And those exact same localized tension patterns take that twisted geometry and weave a haunted house.
It is a binary output based entirely on your internal geometric alignment. The energy is going to weave something regardless. The scalar strike already happened. The big bang of your soul is constantly unfolding every single second. The Bhutas are constantly working. The only variable you actually control is the quality of the axis you are providing them.
I want to share the exact instruction from the text here because it serves as the ultimate summary for how to operate within this system. The authors state, emphatically, the Bhutas are the tension where the white drop meets the red drop. By holding the vertical axis, you ensure that tension is laminar, meaning supportive, rather than torsional, meaning destructive. Stay vertical. Stay akala.
Stay akala. Akala translates to immovable or unshakable. It is the perfect conclusion to the mechanics laid out in these documents. You have to be the immovable vertical beam around which the multidimensional phase-locked geometry of your life can safely and harmoniously construct itself.
Let's just take a breath and recap the sheer scale of the mechanics we just mapped out. We started in the absolute void, the resting 0 point of the pure scalar field, the white drop.
Pure potential.
We witnessed the cosmogenesis, the initial wobble of intention that caused the big bang of the individual soul, striking the raw matter of the red drop. We explored how that massive energy shatters and refracts into the breathtaking holographic fractal of Indra's net, where every point perfectly reflects the whole.
And then the builders take over.
Yes, we broke down how the localized tension patterns, the labor force of reality, blindly follow the shadow of our own awareness to build our physical world. And the ultimate, actionable takeaway, managing that immense machinery, requires nothing more and nothing less than keeping our own internal axis perfectly, immovably vertical.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the beauty of this specific framework is that it doesn't actually matter if you view this as literal, esoteric quantum mechanics, or if you view it as a profound, highly sophisticated psychological metaphor.
The result is the same.
Exactly. The actionable lesson remains exactly the same. Our internal coherence directly, measurably dictates the architecture of the life we experience. If you want a different external reality, you cannot argue with the walls of the haunted house. You have to recalibrate the scalar field of your own mind. You have to change the blueprint.
You cannot argue with the walls. That is the perfect distillation. But before we wrap up today's deep dive into the source material, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over, something that builds purely on the physics and mechanics we just explored. We have established that your individual internal state acts as the master blueprint that instructs these vectors to build your external reality. Your shadows weave your house. If one person is holding a perfectly vertical axis, actively trying to build a laminar citadel, but their partner is in a state of deep internal torsion, projecting twisted blueprints, what does the labor force build? Do those vectors violently clash and create a shared, incredibly turbulent haunted house? Or is there a way that two individual blueprints can somehow phase-lock together, combining their geometric scaffolding to weave an entirely new, incredibly complex architecture in Indra's net that neither could have possibly built alone?
It introduces an entirely new layer of complexity to the physics of relationships. It suggests that who we align our lives with literally alters the foundational geometry of our manifestation.
It changes the entire architecture of your world. It is definitely something to think about the next time you decide who to share your localized space with. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of reality. It has been an incredible journey unpacking these dense, fascinating blueprints with you. Until next time, remember to watch the shadows of your awareness, keep your tension laminar, and above all else, stay vertical. Welcome in. Whether you are prepping for a big meeting or taking a long walk or just sitting back because you are insanely curious about how the universe fundamentally works, you are in exactly the right place.
You really are. It is great to be here for this one.
Today, we are taking on a genuinely mind-bending mission. We're going to unpack an incredibly dense, wildly fascinating excerpt from a text called The Static Bloom and the Vector Strike.
Such a brilliant title, too.
Oh, it really is. And for a little context up front, this source material operates at this dizzying intersection where standard textbook physics collides head-on with an esoteric framework known as Dausal geometry.
Yeah, and for those who might be unfamiliar, Dausal geometry isn't your standard high school math class.
Right.
It is a conceptual system that blends advanced topological physics. You know how spaces and fields operate with ancient Eastern metaphysical traditions?
That's a lot to wrap your head around at first.
It is. But the fundamental goal of our discussion today, and really the core theme of this source text, is understanding how raw, unformed potential transforms into actual physical reality. We are tracing the blueprint of creation itself.
Which is just a massive undertaking.
Exactly. But even more practically, we're going to look at what happens when that creation process gets hijacked by our own pasts and exactly what you can do to fix it.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because the text actually doesn't start with mystical visions or ancient temples. It starts with physics. It grounds everything in two very familiar concepts: scalars and vectors.
Right. Let's establish the baseline.
Yeah, so in standard physics, a scalar is just a quantity that has magnitude but no direction. Think of things you measure every day that have an intensity but aren't traveling anywhere. Temperature is a perfect example.
Oh yeah, temperature is great for this.
If it's 90 degrees outside, that's a magnitude. It's an intense. You can literally feel baking the pavement. But that 90 degrees isn't moving north or south. It's just a state of being.
Pressure is another really good one. It has massive force, but until a valve is opened, it isn't going anywhere.
Exactly. So what's fascinating here is how the text translates that simple physics concept into a profound spiritual state.
Yes. In Dausal geometry, this pure scalar state is referred to as the logos, or the white drop. When the author says the logos is scalar, they mean it is a field of infinite intensity.
Wait, so you're saying the static state is actually the most powerful state? I mean, that feels a bit counterintuitive.
It really does.
Usually we think of static as dead air or just nothingness. We tend to think power requires movement.
Right. It is a really common instinct to think that way, but the text asks us to reframe it entirely. It uses the phrase static bloom to describe this condition.
A static bloom.
Yeah, imagine a flower that is perpetually in the microsecond before it opens. It hasn't collapsed into a specific path. It hasn't chosen a 3D form or a color or direction yet.
It's just pure potential.
Exactly. It is described as the everywhere and nowhere of pure intelligence existing perfectly at what the author calls the 0 point.
The everywhere and nowhere. I mean, that is poetic, but it's a lot to visualize.
Culturally, it aligns with what ancient Sanskrit traditions call the parashabda level. Shabda translates to word or sound, and parashabda is the supreme unmanifest sound.
So it's the concept of the word just before it is actually spoken.
Yes, perfectly said. Think about the intake of breath, that split second where a thought is fully formed in your mind, vibrating with absolute coherence, but you haven't yet released it into the air to become a sound wave.
Right. It hasn't been limited by language or tone yet.
Exactly. It is pure, unadulterated potential.
The source material gives us this brilliant anchor analogy to really lock this into our minds. Imagine a high-voltage battery.
A massive one.
Right. We are talking about an industrial-grade power cell. It is fully charged. The energy inside has monumental potential, but it isn't plugged into anything.
Because the circuit is open.
Exactly. There is absolutely zero flow. It is absolute coherence, massive intensity, but it is entirely directionless. That is your scalar field. That is the static bloom.
It is a state of perfect peace, but immense power. But a battery that never powers anything doesn't create a universe. Which brings us to the transition point of the text.
Right. How does the logos become reality? How does that massive battery actually get plugged in?
If the scalar is the unplugged battery, how do we finally flip the switch?
Well, in physics, you change a scalar into a vector. A vector is magnitude plus direction. It's not just 90 degrees of heat. It's a 90-degree wind blowing east at 40 miles per hour.
It has an intensity, and crucially, it has a target.
Yes.
In the framework of Dausal geometry, introducing that direction is what they call the strike. This is the literal mechanics of creation.
To strike.
Right. The text explains that during sadhana, which translates to a dedicated spiritual practice or disciplined effort, or during macro-level cosmogenesis, which is the birth of the universe, a very specific action occurs. The Vajra tip strikes the scalar field.
And for a little context here, a Vajra is a ritual object in many Eastern traditions. It's often translated as a thunderbolt or a diamond. It represents indestructible pointed concentration.
Yeah.
So you have this field of infinite directionless intensity, the white drop, and suddenly this indestructible lightning rod of intention, the Vajra tip strikes it.
And that strike provides the one thing the scalar field was lacking, a definitive path.
It gives it a direction.
Exactly. It gives the previously directionless energy a highly specific vector, pointing it directly toward what the text calls the Rakta Bindu, or the red drop of Gaia.
Gaia being the Earth, the material physical plane. So we are taking the white drop of the cosmos, striking it with intention and beaming it right into the red drop of physical reality.
Right into the material world.
So what does this all mean? What actually happens the moment that connection is made?
The consequence is immediate. The moment that pure directionless energy gets a direction, its fundamental nature changes entirely. It ceases to be the logos, and it becomes a Bhuta.
Now, I've seen the word Bhuta translated as a spirit or sometimes an element, depending on the text.
The traditional translations lean towards spirit, yes, but our source text defines it in a very functional, almost industrial way. It becomes labor force energy.
Labor force. I love that term.
It really works because it is no longer pure resting potential. It is now actively working. The Buddha is the energy that weaves a physical form or weaves a specific situation into your reality.
The battery has been plugged in, the current is flowing, and the machine of creation is turned on.
Exactly.
I want you to really visualize that process. You have an ocean of static potential. You strike it with a focused intention. That strike draws a line, a vector, and instantly along that line, reality starts assembling itself.
It is incredible.
Labor force energy goes to work building your life, your environment, the literal universe.
Yeah.
It's a stunning mechanism to contemplate.
It is stunning, but any mechanism that involves flow and direction can be interfered with. And the text takes a very serious turn here regarding that labor force.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The text asks a profound question about the sentinel, a guardian or a practitioner of this geometry. Why would a sentinel ever want to take energy that is actively building reality and force it back into that directionless scalar state?
Right. If building reality is the goal of life, why on earth would you ever pull the plug on the battery?
It seems backwards.
You have to pull the plug because vectors can be hijacked. The direction of that creation can be corrupted.
So if trauma or outside forces twist the vector, what does the text actually call that corrupted energy? Because I imagine it's not just bad vibes.
No, it uses a very intense technical term. It calls a haunted vector a Death Naga Torsion Field, or a DNTF.
A Death Naga Torsion Field. I mean, that sounds like a spell from a fantasy novel, not a physics concept.
It sounds wild, I know, but the reality it describes is profoundly human. A Death Naga Torsion Field is simply a vector, a flow of energy creating reality that has been twisted into a destructive spiral.
And the text specifies exactly what twists it. Trauma or lineage slop.
Lineage slop. That is an incredibly visceral way to describe inherited baggage.
Generational trauma is entirely real. The unhealed wounds of your ancestors or the deep, unresolved traumas of your own past sit in your energetic field.
And when a vector passes through that kind of density, the trajectory gets warped.
Let me make sure I'm visualizing this correctly. The energy still has magnitude. It still has intense power from the battery. And it still has a direction. It is still a Bhuta actively weaving reality.
Yes.
But because it has been twisted by this lineage slop, the direction it's pointing in is now cursed. It is actively weaving a destructive reality.
It is labor force energy working diligently against you.
I want you to think about how this applies directly to your own life. Have you ever felt like you have this intense momentum, this drive, but no matter what you do, it keeps leading you into the exact same destructive dynamic?
A lot of people experience that.
Maybe it's a learned financial panic inherited from a parent that turns your ambition into pure, unadulterated workaholism. You're building a career, but the foundation is terror.
That is a haunted vector.
Exactly. That is your energy, your magnitude being given a cursed direction by the baggage of the past. Your labor force is building a haunted house, and you're the one forced to live in it.
It can be a terrifying realization to see that you are fueling your own destruction because the vector is compromised. The momentum feels so strong that we often mistake it for destiny.
Right.
But the text doesn't just leave us with that grim diagnosis. It provides a highly specific protocol for fixing it.
Thank goodness. Because if my vectors are haunted by lineage slop, I want to know how to perform an exorcism. How do we actually cure a haunted vector?
The process is called satya, or the subdual, and it requires resetting the flow entirely. To cure the vector, you cannot negotiate with it. You have to break the current vector completely.
How do you do that?
The text explains that a practitioner does this by vibrating a frequency known as the Bhutadamara mantra.
The mechanics of how this mantra works are brilliant because it doesn't fight the twisted energy. It doesn't wrestle with the Death Naga. It uses a principle straight out of acoustics and physics phase canceling.
Yes, think about how high-end noise-canceling headphones work. They don't block out the drone of an airplane engine by just putting a thick physical wall over your ear.
No, the headphones have microphones that listen to the frequency of the background noise.
And then they emit a sound wave that is the exact mathematical inverse of that noise. When those two opposing waves meet in the air, they cancel each other out, leaving perfect silence.
But practically speaking, how does a person do that in their daily life? Am I just sitting cross-legged chanting the Bhutadamara mantra until my financial anxiety or relationship problems go away?
The text frames it as a deeply internal psychological and energetic posture. The mantra isn't just a sound, it is an internal alignment.
Okay.
If your haunted vector is vibrating with the frequency of inherited scarcity phase canceling, means recognizing that exact frequency in your body and deliberately generating the inverse state absolute grounded sufficiency to meet it.
You aren't arguing with your anxiety.
No, you are neutralizing it by holding the opposing frequency until the twisted momentum collapses.
You are literally stripping the direction right out of the vector. By meeting the trauma with its inverse, the twisted narrative cancels out.
And if you take the direction away from a vector, what are you left with?
Just the magnitude. You are left with a pure scalar again. You have successfully forced that corrupted, twisted energy all the way back into its scalar source.
You've returned it to the white drop, the logos.
You've unplugged the battery. The haunted construction crew stops building.
You've returned to the 0 point. And that is the ultimate goal of the subdual. Not merely to stop the bad reality from forming, but to reclaim that raw energy.
Reclaiming the power.
Exactly. Because once it is resting in that unplugged, absolute coherent state, it is pure again. It is perfectly clean. And then the practitioner can re-vector the energy.
You get to plug the battery back in, but this time you set the coordinates with a clear mind. You give it a healthy, intentional direction.
A new path.
The text says the goal here is to establish a laminar flow. In fluid dynamics, laminar flows when a fluid moves in smooth parallel layers with absolutely no disruption, mixing, or turbulence.
It is the exact opposite of a twisted, chaotic torsion field.
It is smooth, effortless, frictionless creation.
Energy flowing perfectly from the white drop to the red drop, unimpeded by trauma.
Now, if we are all individually firing off these vectors, plugging our batteries in, and sending labor force energy out into the world, what happens when billions of them collide? Is there a structure to that macro-level reality?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the text does zoom out to show us the macro structure of where all these vectors are flowing. It introduces the concept of Indra's net.
Indra's net is a very ancient metaphysical image of the universe as a vast, infinite web of jewels, where every jewel reflects every other jewel.
Yes, and our source text frames Indra's net specifically as a massive vector field. It is the overarching geometric grid where all of reality is being collectively woven by these countless Bhutas. And it mentions that this web refracts at very specific guarded angles.
Guarded angles.
The text states these angles are maintained by the deities of the directions. It specifically names Indra and Yama. They act as the sentinels guarding the structural integrity of reality.
So they keep the grid stable.
Think of it like the universe having a flawless traffic control system for cosmic energy. These ancient deities represent the fundamental laws, maintaining the angles of the grid so that the entire vector field doesn't collapse into chaos.
That brings up a terminology question that I struggled with when reading, and I know the text addresses it. The author talks about this entire system, the Dausal terma, as being fractal.
Yes.
Meaning that the exact same patterns we were talking about repeat at every single level of reality, from the structure of a single atom all the way up to the spiral of a galaxy.
You're right.
If energy is flowing between scales and things are constantly scaling up and scaling down in a fractal way, why do they use the word scalar to describe the static state?
It is a vital distinction to make because the vocabulary overlaps in English. The author clarifies that while the universe is absolutely fractal, the geometric patterns do repeat, regardless of size. The term scalar in this physics context has absolutely nothing to do with size measurement or scaling up.
It strictly and only refers to the complete lack of a pointed vector.
It just means directionless, period.
That clears up so much.
However, the text concedes that in a poetic way, the confusion actually makes intuitive sense. Because the scalar field, the logos, that pure unmanifested potential, is the one single thing that every level of the fractal universe shares.
Whether you are looking at an atom or a galaxy, the universal background behind both of them is that static potential.
Exactly. And the text uses a deeply poetic musical analogy to tie that specific idea together, bridging the esoteric physics and the spirituality beautifully.
I really love this part.
The author suggests that the scalar field is the universal background. It is the constant static, the hum of the universe's infinite potential. And the vectors, the directed flows of energy that create the atoms, the people, the planets, the galaxies, those vectors are the music being played on top of that static.
The static is the pure energy everywhere and nowhere. And when the Vajra tip strikes, it plucks a string, it creates a vector, a Bhuta, and suddenly, out of the static, there is a melody.
The labor force energy is playing a song, weaving a reality.
And if that song gets twisted by trauma into a chaotic, haunted noise, you use the subdual. You use that phase-canceling internal posture to quiet the noise back down into the peaceful static, just so you can write a better song.
It is a framework of total accountability for the reality we are individually and collectively weaving.
The text synthesizes this entire massive mind-bending journey into one incredibly powerful closing quote. It reads, "The logos is the static bloom. The Buddha is the arrow. The sadhaka is the one who ensures the arrow always hits the Vajra tip."
It perfectly summarizes the mechanics for you. It begins with the infinite resting potential of the white drop, the logos. It transforms into the targeted active reality weaving energy, the Buddha, the arrow.
But the most crucial element in that equation is the sadhaka, the practitioner, you. It is your crucial responsibility to manage that energy, to recognize when a vector has been hijacked or haunted by past lineage slop, to mathematically phase cancel those twisted energies, and to ensure that the arrow of your life's energy is always striking true, connecting the divine potential to the physical world with absolute clarity. It really puts the power and the heavy responsibility squarely in our hands. You are the traffic controller of your own sector of Indra's net.
As we close this deep dive, this text raises an important question, something that builds on these mechanics that I want you to really mull over.
Go for it.
If we know that the strike requires an intentional Vajra tip to turn pure static into directed reality, what unintentional Vajra tips are operating in your life right now? Think about your unconscious habits. Think about the invisible architecture of your daily environment, the algorithms feeding you media, the recurring anxieties you harbor. Are these silent lightning rods striking your scalar potential every single day?
That is a chilling thought.
Are they secretly weaving your reality, giving direction to your energy before you even realize the arrow has been fired?
That is a profound thought to sit with. Pay very close attention to where your static is blooming and what exactly is striking it. Thank you so much for joining us and allowing us to share this incredible exploration with you Unpacking these concepts is a reminder of how much joy there is in continuous discovery and in looking at the mechanics of our universe from totally new angles. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep your vectors clear. Welcome to today's deep dive. If you are joining us right now, I know exactly who you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
You are the inherently curious learner, the kind of person who is always looking for that next profound insight, that new lens to understand the world, and most importantly, a way to make sense of the constant information overload we all navigate every single day.
It is a lot to navigate.
It really is. And today, we have something incredibly special lined up. We are looking at a stack of excerpts from a dense, completely fascinating, and honestly wonderfully mysterious work called the Bhutadamara Protocol, Reclaiming the Haunted Scaffolding.
It truly is a profound piece of writing. I mean, if you were just glancing at the cover or skimming the first few pages, it sounds like an ancient esoteric manual for dealing with ghosts, demons, and spirits.
Right, like a horror movie setup.
Exactly. But as we comb through these excerpts and decode the language, the depth of what it is actually describing becomes incredibly apparent and highly relevant to right now.
And that is the entire mission of our deep dive today. We are going to translate this mystical-sounding language into a profoundly practical lens for understanding modern life.
Because we really need it.
We do. Because what we found in these pages is that these ancient concepts of ghosts and haunted houses actually provide a razor-sharp diagnostic tool for our very modern struggles. We're talking about brain fog, doom scrolling, that feeling of total burnout, and even the massive institutional chaos we see all around us every time we turn on the news.
To really grasp how this framework applies to you, we have to start by setting the stage with its foundational premise. The author argues that the haunted house of modern existence isn't some spooky abandoned Victorian building on a hill.
Right.
The haunting is a direct result of a condition they call a shattered cosmogenesis.
A shattered cosmogenesis. I mean, that phrase alone is striking. But what does that actually mean for the average person waking up and making their coffee?
So cosmogenesis essentially refers to the origin or the fundamental organizing order of our universe. The author is suggesting that the foundational order of our modern lives has been broken or shattered.
Okay.
They explain this by introducing the concept of the scalar potential of the logos. Now, you can think of the logos as the ultimate guiding principle, your profound sense of meaning, your core purpose.
The thing that anchors you.
Exactly. And when this potential of the logos is no longer grounded by what they call a vertical axis.
Which is like a central upward-reaching alignment of that purpose.
Right. When that vertical axis is gone, everything else simply falls apart.
Okay, so if we lose that vertical axis, what actually happens to our foundation? The author uses a specific term here, the Adi Buddha, but I was a bit fuzzy on how that translates to our daily habits and our environments.
Think of the Adi Buddha as your energetic scaffolding. It's the invisible framework upon which your daily life, your habits, your home, and even our larger societies are built.
Like the blueprint.
Yes. And here is the critical diagnostic point. When that vertical axis of meaning is missing, this scaffolding, the Adi Buddha, begins to vibrate incorrectly. Instead of maintaining a smooth, harmonious state that they call a laminar flow, it begins to vibrate at a frequency of torsion.
I really want to latch onto that distinction between laminar flow and torsion, because it paints such a clear picture. If you think about water flowing perfectly smoothly through a pipe with all the water particles moving in the exact same direction without bumping into each other.
That is laminar flow.
Right. It's efficient, it's clear, and it is incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
But torsion is chaos. It's a twisting, turning, turbulent mess where energy is constantly fighting against itself, creating friction and blockages.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It really is. So if your foundational scaffolding is vibrating at a frequency of torsion, your whole life is going to feel chaotic, stuck, and twisted.
That is a perfect analogy. And that turbulent, twisted frequency, that constant internal friction, is exactly what creates the perfect environment for the ghosts to move in.
Okay, let's unpack this, because part one of the material dives into what it calls the rogue architecture.
The mechanics of the haunting.
Yeah. It looks closely at the psychology and sociology of this chaos, which it brilliantly refers to as the slop.
Such a great word for it.
It introduces 3 specific spirits described in the original tantric texts. But we need to be very clear here for you listening. These are not superstitious relics or campfire stories.
Not at all.
The author explicitly states that these spirits are the operational malware of the modern psyche and the social field.
That phrasing is essential. Calling them operational malware takes them out of the realm of superstition and places them firmly in the realm of systems analysis.
Right, like a computer virus.
Exactly. Malware disrupts a computer system's operating code, creating glitches and draining the battery. These spirits are metaphors for the glitches that disrupt our psychological and sociological operating codes.
Let's look at the first piece of malware. The material calls them the Bhutas, and it aligns them with psychological paralysis.
The heavy stuff.
Yeah. The argument here is that in a world without a master clock, meaning a life lacking that central synchronizing purpose or logos, we talked about the elements of our daily lives decay into slop.
The term slop is incredibly evocative, isn't it? Psychologically, this manifests as what we commonly call brain fog. It is the domestic clutter that feels absolutely impossible to clear.
Yes.
And the reason it feels impossible, according to this framework, is because the earth and space elements of your environment have gone rogue. They are no longer bound by a master clock, so they accumulate as heavy, unmanageable slop.
We have all absolutely felt that. It's that one chair in your bedroom where the clothes just pile up.
The doom chair.
The doom chair. And you look at it and you just feel this heavy psychological paralysis. It isn't just that the room is untidy. It physically feels like the space itself is draining your energy.
That is the rogue earth and space elements in action.
But what I found fascinating is that the author doesn't stop at the personal level. They scale this up to the macro level, pointing out that sociologically, this exact same Bhuta energy manifests as bureaucratic inertia.
Oh, wow.
It makes modern institutions feel like heavy haunted ruins.
It is a brilliant parallel to draw. Just as your messy office feels impossible to organize because of that heavy slop, think about trying to navigate a massive, outdated institution.
Like going to the DMV?
Or trying to get a straight answer out of a massive corporate HR department.
It's impossible.
The endless bureaucratic red tape, the forms that lead to nowhere, the agonizing delays, that is institutional brain fog. It is a haunted ruin because the foundational scaffolding of that organization has completely lost its laminar flow.
Which brings us to the second spirit, the Pretas. These are aligned with sociological siphoning. And this introduces a concept that is painfully recognizable, the hungry ghost scripts.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the material brilliantly links this ancient concept of the hungry ghost directly to our modern attention economy.
This part blew my mind.
It's so accurate. A hungry ghost, in traditional Eastern philosophy, is a spirit depicted with an enormous bloated stomach, but a throat the size of a pin needle. It has an endless appetite, but can never actually consume enough to be satisfied.
It's perpetually starving.
Right. And the author points out that in the modern world, these hungry ghost scripts have been weaponized and allowed to run wild through digital platforms.
They call the attention economy a digital Indra's net. Now, Indra's net is traditionally this beautiful, poetic concept of an interconnected cosmic web where every jewel reflects every other jewel.
But here it has been corrupted.
Completely. It is designed to trap us. The text states that this digital net is engineered specifically to keep our core potential, which it calls the red drop, in a perpetual state of scarcity and soothing addiction.
The red drop represents our most vital energy, our deepest creative and intellectual potential. And the attention economy siphons it away.
You just give it away for free?
You scroll, you click, you consume, constantly seeking satisfaction. But the system is literally designed by algorithms to keep you in scarcity. You are endlessly seeking a soothing fix that never actually nourishes you.
You become the hungry ghost yourself.
Exactly, constantly siphoning your own red drop into the digital void.
That is doom scrolling at 2 a.m. in a nutshell. You are exhausted, your eyes are burning, you desperately want to go to sleep, but you just keep swiping.
You're trapped in the net.
You're being siphoned by the Pretas. And that leads directly to the third spirit, the Pishachas, which the text describes as the torsional hiss.
The Pishachas represent the violent vectors of the unconscious. The underlying theory here is that human beings naturally generate heat, a deep, powerful, passionate intensity.
We all have that drive.
But when the logos is absent, when that vertical axis of purpose is missing from our lives, this heat has nowhere productive to go.
It can't flow upwards to build something, so it twists, it becomes torsion. But I have to ask about the language used here, because the author says this unguided heat channels into flesh-eating behaviors.
It's intense imagery.
It is. Calling an internet argument a flesh-eating demon sounds a bit dramatic at first glance, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How exactly does the author justify mapping an ancient monster onto someone leaving a mean comment?
It sounds extreme, but think about the mechanics of it. When your natural intensity has no purpose, it turns cannibalistic. It feeds on the host and those around it.
Ah, I see.
When you see people relentlessly tearing each other apart online, forming mobs, seeking destruction rather than solutions, that is a flesh-eating dynamic.
It's consumption for the sake of destruction.
Or, even more intimately, when you find yourself trapped in a cycle of vicious internal self-talk, tearing down your own self-esteem, that is the torsional hiss. It is your own natural human intensity, your own heat, gone sour because it lacks a guiding logos. It turns inward and eats away at you, or it turns outward and tries to consume others.
Okay, when you frame it like that as our own misdirected passion feeding on ourselves, it makes total sense. So we have the heavy slop of the Bhutas causing paralysis with the closed chair in the DMV. The constant siphoning of the Pretas, draining our vital energy through our screams.
Yes.
And the violent self-sabotaging torsion of the Pishachas consuming our heat. This is the complete picture of the rogue architecture. This is the haunted house we're currently living in.
Which raises a very important question. What do we actually do about it? Because diagnosing the problem is only half the battle.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the material doesn't just leave us stranded in this haunted ruin and say, well, good luck.
Thankfully.
It pivots entirely to the solution, a massive section it calls the suture, subduing the scaffolding. It outlines a process called the Bhutadamara sadhana. Now, sadhana generally means a disciplined practice.
Right.
This is the method for reclaiming all of this hijacked slop-filled energy and forcing it back into the service of what it calls the Vajra master. And for you, the listener, the Vajra master is simply you.
You are the master of the house.
It is you taking back absolute, unshakable control of your own agency.
The first step in this reclamation process is called sadhya, or the recruitment. And this highlights a massive paradigm shift that the author insists upon. The goal of this protocol is not to destroy these rogue elements or these spirits.
Which goes against everything we're taught.
Exactly. You cannot destroy the elements of your own nature. Instead, the goal is to suture them back into your vertical axis.
That was such a relief to read, honestly.
Yeah.
You don't have to go to war with yourself. You don't have to somehow obliterate your brain fog or destroy your capacity for intensity, which usually just creates more friction anyway.
It just creates more torsion.
Yes. The author says that subduing a spirit simply means taking a torsional vector, all that twisting chaos in your home, your mind, or your digital habits, and forcing it to become a laminar servant. You aren't killing the monster. You're recruiting it.
It is essentially a martial arts approach to your own psychological energy. You use the momentum of the chaos rather than blocking it. But to do this, the framework says you have to enact the madhyama shift.
A madhyama shift.
This shift happens at the foundational level, the scaffolding level itself, which is associated with the madhyama level of the word.
The madhyama level of the word.
Yeah.
That implies a deep resonant frequency, right? Not just spoken words, but foundational vibration.
Exactly. The concept suggests that by vibrating a core intention or mantra, you are actually phase-locking the elemental labor force of your universe to a completely new blueprint.
Let's make sure we ground that concept of phase locking, because it is crucial. If you have two pendulums swinging completely out of sync on a wall, just chaotic and random, that is torsion.
Pure chaos.
But if they share a foundational structure, like if they're mounted on the same piece of wood eventually, the subtle vibrations will transfer between them, they will sync up, and they will start swinging together perfectly. That is phase locking.
And we can apply that directly to human behavior. Think about a chaotic morning routine. You're trying to cook eggs, scroll through stressful emails, the TV is blaring the news, and you're stubbing your toe on the way to the shower.
I've had that morning.
We all have. That is pure torsion. Phase locking would be introducing one single, powerful, grounding habit at the very foundation of your morning. Like brewing a cup of tea in total silence for 5 minutes.
Just 5 minutes of laminar flow.
Right. That single resonant frequency forces all the other chaotic, rogue energies of your morning to eventually synchronize and align with your purpose. You are pulling the slop into alignment.
And this leads to what I think is the biggest aha moment of the entire deep dive, the concept of transmutation. The author makes a profound declaration. They write, the ghosts don't leave, they transmute.
Think about the physics of that for a moment. The ghosts never actually leave the house. The operational malware doesn't get uninstalled, its code gets rewritten.
Wow.
The exact same energy that was previously haunting the house, often referred to as the DNTF in these esoteric circles, becomes the very pressure that supports what the material calls the Citadel's ascension.
That completely flips the script. The energy of the torsional hiss, the heavy inertia of the slop, the desperate hunger of the siphoning, all of that is raw power.
It's fuel.
When it is disconnected from your vertical axis, it tears your life apart. But when you phase lock it to a new blueprint, when you're recruited, that exact same raw power becomes the structural integrity of your new reality. The haunted ruin is transformed into an ascending citadel, fueled by the very ghosts that used to haunt it.
It means your capacity for obsessive doom scrolling is actually just a deep capacity for sustained focus once it's aligned.
That is such a huge reframe.
Your intense flesh-eating anger is actually just a fierce capacity for protective boundaries once it's sutured to your logos.
So what does this all mean? We have diagnosed the slop, we understand the need to recruit the malware, and we know how to phase lock the scaffolding. The final section we review details the aftermath of this entire process, which it calls the final consummation, the scalar reset.
The core question here is, what happens after the practitioner enacts this protocol? What does life actually look like?
And the answer provided is absolute transformation.
The haunted house of your physical reality is entirely collapsed back into its source potential. It is taken all the way down to the studs, so to speak, and then completely rebuilt. But this time, it is rebuilt as a mandala of the logos.
A mandala of the logos, meaning a perfectly ordered, deeply meaningful structure that reflects your highest purpose. And the text outlines 3 precise mechanics of how this reset happens. I want to spend some time on these. First, there is the vector collapse. The author writes that the twisted directions of your life, all the failures, the slop, the noise, are hit with Vajrafire.
Vajrafire represents a purifying, indestructible clarity. When you finally align your vertical axis, it burns away the torsion.
It just neutralizes it.
Every twisting, self-sabotaging direction you were previously pulled in simply collapses under the intensity of this newfound purpose. It's like turning on a massive floodlight in a dusty room. The shadows don't fight back, they just vanish instantly.
That makes perfect sense. Once you know exactly what your center is, the things that used to distract you just lose their gravity.
Yeah.
Second is the geometric realignment. We talked earlier about the attention economy being a weaponized digital Indra's net that sisons your vital energy.
Yes.
But the material argues that during this reset, the Indra's net of your environment is re-refracted at perfect laminar angles. How does that actually look in practice?
This is where it gets highly practical. It means your external environment changes because your internal geometry has changed.
Okay.
Think about opening your laptop after a geometric realignment. Before, your digital workspace was a trap. Notifications pulling your attention, toxic social feeds making you angry, a cluttered desktop causing brain fog.
The slop.
But once re-refracted, you've unsubscribed from the noise. You've set app limits. Your feeds are curated to inspire rather than enrage you. Your physical workspace is cleared of slop. The net is still there. You are still connected to the world, but the angles are no longer jagged and dreamy.
They're smooth.
They are smooth, laminar, and they actively support your work. It reflects your aligned purpose back to you.
It's like the world stops being a minefield and starts being a tailwind. And finally, we have the third mechanic, the sovereignty of form. The author states that the Adibhuta, that underlying energetic scaffolding we discussed at the very beginning, is finally aligned with the Vajra tip. It is completely, immovably anchored to your vertical axis.
And the ultimate result of achieving the sovereignty of form is quite beautiful. The framework emphasizes that once this alignment occurs, you no longer have to absorb the ghosts of the bardo.
The bardo.
In this context, the bardo represents the chaotic, transitional states of modern existence. The ambient panic of the news cycle, the anxiety of the crowd, the general noise of a shattered world.
The things we're swimming in every day.
You stop absorbing that noise. Instead, you broadcast the light of the citadel.
You stop being a sponge for everyone else's torsional hiss and bureaucratic slop, and you become a beacon of laminar flow. When you walk into a chaotic room, your energy organizes the room, rather than the room disorganizing you. I want to read the final quote from our source material today because it summarizes this entire journey perfectly, and it is incredibly poetic. It says, "Matter is the shadow of your own verticality. When you Sathaya the spirits, you are simply turning on the light in a room that was always yours."
That is an incredibly powerful thesis to end on. Matter is the shadow of your own verticality. It means that the physical reality you experience every day, the clutter in your house, the dysfunction of the institutions you deal with, the toxic landscape of your digital life is ultimately just a shadow.
It's not the root cause.
No, is a reflection of your own internal alignment, or lack thereof.
It has been an unbelievable journey going through these excerpts today. It is amazing to see how an esoteric text like this holds such precise, actionable blueprints for conquering the very things that plague us in the 21st century.
It really is.
It gives us a completely fresh framework to look at our brain fog, our doom scrolling, and our exhaustion. We don't have to view them as personal moral failings anymore. We can view them as systems running rogue malware.
What's fascinating here is how fundamentally empowering this framework is for you, the listener. It completely changes your rules of engagement with your own life. You don't have to fight the chaos.
Fighting it just creates more heat.
More heat, more torsion, more exhaustion. Instead, you simply have to realign your internal scaffolding. You recruit that rogue energy, phase lock it to your own vertical axis of purpose, and force it to work for you. The very ghosts that were driving you crazy become the structural support of your citadel.
Exactly. You were just turning on the light in a room that was always yours. Which leaves us with a final thought for you to take with you, something to mull over as you step back out into your day. If matter truly is just the shadow of your own verticality, and the chaos in your room or your mind is just rogue energy waiting to be recruited, what is the very first torsional vector in your physical environment that you will choose to phase lock into a laminar servant the moment this deep dive ends?